And welcome to the Wednesday, December 18th work session meeting of the Penfield Town Board. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Barry.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Leenhouts.
Here.
Here.
Teglash.
Here.
Okay, next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Everybody get a chance to look?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, so moved. Can we get a vote?
Barry.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Leenhouts.
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
Teglash.
Aye.
All aye.
You good, go.
Okay, we're going to move on to the first action item, which is town court security contract. We have our esteemed judges here, Judge Paula Metzler and Judge Jim Mully here tonight to partly lead the conversation. Yeah, come ahead. You have some practice at this, I think, both of you, right?
Yes, we have.
They don't like to see us.
Not the case here.
Oh, a little more friendly crowd here.
So, yeah. Go ahead, Jim.
You start? Okay,
Yeah.
so we sent out a request for proposals for security contract for the courts. I just think as a general statement, we're constantly looking at ways to improve security. We've done that in a lot of ways, largely with JCAP funding, which is funding that's available to the courts, town courts. There's over 1,300 town courts in the state. There's JCAP funding available. You already have the JCAP application this year. We're looking to update the magnetometers in the courtroom. We've used it in the past to purchase gangable chairs in the courtroom so you don't have loose chairs around, so they're gangable. We got a large grant from the state to do that. We've redesigned the holding room. We've have cameras in the parking lot now. These are things that we haven't had in the past. I can view from the chambers the parking lot and various areas of the court. So we're constantly looking for ways to upgrade. As far as the provision of security, the town courts in Monroe County and throughout the state use different ways of providing that security. Some towns have police forces, and they're right in the building, and they may use the police to provide security. Others contract out with agencies in the area. Others use town employees. So there's different ways of delivering the service. And I think the best way I can say is we're constantly looking to upgrade. We're constantly looking to see what's the best way to provide services. And I think one of the things we just have to be aware of, it's just the way it is, the level of threats, the number of threats have increased. And they have our attention, and we're working to just provide the most secure environment we can for the people who attend court, for our staff, our clerk staff, and for us. So that's part of what we're looking to do is just we put an RFP out, see what's available, and we'll proceed from there. We don't have a predetermined end game. It's not like at the end of this is where we want to go. We want to see what's out there, who can deliver the service best, and then we'll make a decision or a recommendation and see what we can do to provide.
And we're certainly appreciate coming here this evening, but we also are very mindful that we are in a building that's a multi-use building. The courthouse, the courts is unique. If you go downtown, the Hall of Justice security is different than City Hall or the county office building, much different. But we also are mindful that we have rec programs. In the summertime, we've got camps, we've got the library there. And as some of you are aware, we have had a couple instances recently where we've had to lock down because of the death threat or other types of threats that have come. But I think that for the most part, the thrust of what we're looking to do is really within the courtroom and also people coming into the court. We could sit here all evening to tell you about instances where we've had really dicey situations in court, probably pretty much every docket, even small claims, landlord-tenant, criminal dockets, those can get very volatile. due to the types of issues that people are having when they come in. It's different than going downtown where a lot of people have been incarcerated for a while and they're coming to court with transport deputies. We have people coming in who we may be issuing an order of protection. We don't even know if the victim, the alleged victim, and their family are in the audience when that person is being brought out. We had a father of an alleged victim came. We had no idea, and it got very, very intense, and to the point where not only was it very dangerous, potentially dangerous, but our staff was getting threatened. So it is a different type of building in terms of what we want to accomplish. We're just mindful of where we're at and the people that are around us. As Judge Mully indicated, we don't know what the best scenario is for this. We're here tonight to answer what questions we can at this point, but also get some questions from you. So we're tasked to go forward and do some more homework so that everybody is satisfied at the end, that all the boxes are checked, and that we can do our best to make the court facility safer for everybody who's using it and everybody who's around there. We can't predict everything, but certainly we can go by what we've experienced. Judge Mully and I frequently have to take control of the courtroom, and that's can be kind of scary. And we just want to make sure that we have staff there, bailiffs there, who can assist us. And it's not even so much reacting, it's de-escalating and noticing things. That's what the hallmark of a true experienced court deputy. Judge Mully and I have been in the court system for many years, in the criminal justice system, so we've experienced many different scenarios of court deputies as we've appeared in court. And a lot of what we want to ensure can happen is that not only can there be de-escalation, but anticipation. That our bailiffs are constantly scanning the courtroom, looking to see if somebody is ready to make a move, honestly, looking to see who's coming in the building, noticing who might be sitting by whom. So on that note, I think that we certainly would look forward to any questions that you may have, that we can proceed. I think part of what our intent is we'd like to interview the folks that have submitted the RFPs, because you can tell a lot by how an agency or how a court security personnel will work by interviewing them and asking them hypotheticals. How would you deal with a certain situation? Showing them our court facility and asking them, how would you proceed in securing this place? So that's where we're at right now, but we certainly want to appreciate and take the opportunity to come in and see if there's any questions that you all have or additional concerns or items that we should take a deeper dive on.
If I can just build on one thing that Paula mentioned, was the challenges that the facility itself causes. It's a 1980s schoolhouse is what it is. It's not built for a courtroom. We've used it for a courtroom, but it's not built for that, and it has some specific challenges. So as I said, we've used every tool at our disposal to make it more secure. We had the state come in and do a security audit for us last year to kind of point out the things that could be done better. And so the facility causes some issues, but it's just something we're going to constantly reevaluate.
Right.
And judges, I was just going to say, and maybe you kind of already said it, this is like the first step in a process. I know you mentioned contacting other town courts, what they're doing, getting some feedback there, and as you said, Judge, that you haven't even got to the interview process or going through the RFP, so we're not looking to make any decisions or move on anything tonight.
Yeah, there's a
the way I
county
understand it.
magistrates association. We're both very active in that association, and we can canvass the other courts to see where they are. But that's a moving target, too. If I asked Webster how they did it 3 years ago and how they're doing it today, there's changes that have been made there. So we'll canvass and get the up-to-date information on all the surrounding courts.
And court security is not a unique issue to Penfield. It's kind of fluid, as Judge Mully indicated, but it is also a topic that we talk about with our fellow judges. There have been courts that have gone without court security for a short period of time, and it's been very problematic. But I think that, we can certainly call upon our fellow judges to assist us in seeing what might be, the best scenario for Penfield.
But there's no one-size-fits-all. Like I said, a facility that's built for a courthouse is going to have advantages that we don't have. A town that has a police force is going to handle it differently than a town without a police force.
I was glad to see that I was at the luncheon when the county executive talked about the central arraignment, which I think that starts in March,
Yes.
which should help somewhat, but won't solve everything,
It's a good
obviously.
move forward. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. And we'd be remiss if we didn't recognize the sheriff's office. We've got, although we are a different branch and we do different things in the criminal justice system, we really work very well with them. We've got a good working relationship with our deputies. We do know we can sleep pretty well at night until we get woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning for an arraignment, that we have the sheriffs at 911. If they hear something's going on at the courts, we've got 2 or 3 deputies there in a flash. So we do, and we've had to utilize that. Another aspect that's somewhat different about security in the courts is that sometimes we take people into custody and we don't have law enforcement there. So our court security has to take that person into custody and put them in our holding room and hope that they behave before the sheriff's office gets there. So that's certainly part of this interview process in terms of our facility and the different tasks that our bailiffs would have to do from time to time.
Any questions?
I'm curious. You said you had somebody come in and do an assessment of it all. And in looking at what was received so far, the different RFPs, the proposals that came back there, it's all different.
Yeah.
Right? It's from a large organization that has multiple people to one individual. From that perspective, I know you want to interview. I know there's different things. What scope are you looking at right now? Are you looking for somebody who can come in and be there and protect, or are you looking for a firm that can come in and follow up on some of these things that came out of the assessment?
The assessment was more based on facility, what kind
Right.
of facility changes you can make. So the firm that would be coming in, we're looking for them to provide security during the court sessions.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be to analyze the facility.
You don't want them to go anything further than
No,
that?
well, I want them to know the facility.
Sure.
And that's something that I think is really important, because you need to know, if someone's going to run, where are they going to go? If they go through this door, where's that going to lead
Sure.
them to? They need to know the facility. So that's an important piece of providing security. But, that's what we're looking to do with this proposal, is get the people who will actually be providing security
with
for
them.
a court session.
I'll add that what's important to me, and I think Judge Mully and I are on the same page, is reliable people, experienced people across the board. It's a little unsettling if you have one week retired law enforcement who they've been in the courts before, they're looking around, they're scanning, they're telling me, what's up with this person, and then the next court docket, you have someone who is what you would call just kind of your basic security guard. So that's problematic. So I think consistency, a level of experience, and a level of insight, as Judge Mully has alluded to, is really important in terms of the agency or the outfit. So it would be availability, making sure that can be covered. But we also have tossed around the idea of like a hybrid, situation. Is it something where we have court security, but maybe we don't have to have as many court security if we know that town security is kind of circling around. They know when court's going to be. They're there possibly towards the end of court. That's all things that can be talked about and worked out. I think those are more in the weeds, but certainly we don't know. We don't know the magic formula. We don't know the magic formula whether armed or unarmed. Perhaps we're talking about starting out with unarmed and seeing if that is sufficient. I think what really drives the conversation for me is someone who is qualified, experienced, reliable. and can answer our questions right there in the facility without having to think about it too much.
I think that kind of leads to the question that I wanted to ask. As you know, you just mentioned that we have our own public safety force here at the town. That is potentially expandable to provide the services. I know that most of the officers have worked at the sheriff's office, et cetera. One of the things that I was thinking is that, if you want reliability, they would be directly accountable to the town. I know that part of it is developing a certain culture, certain expectations, that kind of thing. So, you mentioned perhaps a hybrid. Would you consider, the public safety just expanding and doing this, or are you somehow committed to the idea of a hybrid?
I would say that anything that would be expanded, there'd have to be significant training involved. And there is court security training that the state court system does offer. But it's not a matter of just doing a course. And it's kind of like, it when you see it. You know a good bailiff when you see them, as to their alertness and their experience. Certainly, I don't want to say that there's not someone in any security outfit that could not be a court security officer. But as you can see in the RFPs, there's a lot of things alluded to, and that's true. They're not exaggerating what types of strengths we need to have in our court security.
And I think the discussion of a hybrid model, we have to probably use a different model for when the court's in session and when the court's not in session. And when the court's in session, you're definitely going to want security. You're going to need at least 2 people there during the court sessions. But we've had some pretty significant threats when the court's not in session to our clerks and to judges. We weren't there, but they were still that kind of a threat. So currently, we don't have security present when the court's not in session. So that's where expanded use of the town's employees, so that they can get a phone call away to, somebody's acting strange in the parking lot, that kind of to be able to respond to that. It would not be cost effective, or I think necessary, to have a private firm provide court security 24/7, or be there every hour the court's open. But when we're in session, that's where that might be different. But we would like to improve security. There are threats to the library, to the rec department, to us, so that the whole campus. I'd like to evaluate the security for that whole campus and be able to respond when the court's not in session to any perceived threats out there.
I believe there's been a few instances where maybe you've relied on our public safety for arraignments and those sorts of things. Does that work? Is that something that, because again, those pop up, right? There's no planning for those. It's a phone call.
Yeah.
Has that been?
That's been, to me, perhaps the most significant problem. But the centralized arraignment part that will begin in March will be answering much of that. But it's not a great situation at 2 o'clock in the morning when there's no security provided at all, and they're bringing in someone. And remember, it's a public courtroom, so I can recount an incident where, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm out there doing an arraignment on an A1 drug and weapon case, and a car pulls up for people who want to come and watch the session. And it's a public courtroom. They're entitled to come in, but I don't have anybody to even pat them down. So I don't know what I have. So in that case, I told the sheriff, I said, I'm not opening the courtroom until you get back up here. And the sheriff came over and worked security for that arraignment part. So, that's the way it is. It's a little fluid with the court, and you have to just, keep your eyes open and use your experience to be able to realize when you need to make an improvement or handle a situation.
And I know there's been some discussions in the past about, we'll call it a wish list, right, of things that could be improved. And I know the Supervisor mentioned some things that have been added recently. It might be good to still have an ongoing list that we can share, so we have a sense of what it is that could help you, right, could help the staff, and then we can associate it with a plan.
Yeah, a new courtroom would be top, but I don't think that's in the I mean, we got to make do with what we have, and I think we've done a good job of bringing in resources to make it a usable courtroom. We completely redid it to make it look like a principal's office when we first started.
I'm a little nostalgic because I went to 4th grade in part of the
I mean, but we use a lot of JCAP money, probably over $100,000 in the last 10 years, to redo the courtroom, make it, modernize it, and so the facility will be fine going forward.
And Bob, to your point about arraignments, I would rank that as a lower priority. I think probably a prioritization is important too. Adding the cameras with the remotes that we have has been tremendous, so that if I'm coming in at, last Saturday I was there at 3:30 in the morning, coming in, I can flick on those TVs, and I'm in chambers, I'm safe, I'm watching when the sheriff's car is pulling up, I'm watching when the public defender is coming, watching when they're bringing in the person in custody, seeing if there's anybody who's coming to show up who wants to watch or cause trouble. So that's been very helpful. As I mentioned earlier, I do rely on the sheriffs. They call us, they've got our cell numbers, we've got their cell numbers, we know who's coming. And if I at all feel unsafe, I'll just stay in my car until the sheriff gets there. They know when they need backup. Sometimes it'll be in the middle of the night and we've got 3 patrol cars out there because you've got a really unruly person, or more often than not, you've got somebody who, didn't sign up to be arrested and they're under the influence, or they're having a real significant mental health crisis. And we want to make sure that they're safe as well. So that's more of a lower priority. The after hours, with the addition of the centralized arraignment part, certainly we would have other things after hours that come in, like search warrants, things like that, but that's really more just dealing directly with law enforcement. And we can do search warrants anywhere.
I don't think any of us question or doubt the need for security, and so I think all of us are on board there. Carrie, can you remind us, so for these RFPs, what's the turnaround time, or is the board beholden to a certain response time?
They're not. So unlike a public bid, which typically designates a certain period of time that the bid has to be good for, an RFP is more fluid. So these and in the RFP, it always states that the town is under no obligation to act on the RFP, so you're never beholden to any specific, like, you don't have to make a decision, you don't have to award. So you could certainly bring this back to a future work session, and not be in jeopardy of violating the RFP's terms.
So in that, is my microphone like obnoxiously loud compared to other people?
No. You're good.
Okay.
You might be hearing maybe echo. I don't know.
Can I make a suggestion then? Like before interviews actually start with the 3 that responded, especially with it being close to the holidays. I don't imagine you're starting interviews next week, fair to say?
We're not.
Then can I make a suggestion that Kevin and I get together with you from a security perspective and as the Justice Court perspective? And I've been in front of Judge Mully for 18 months, but to clarify, not as a defendant. But you both brought up a lot of great points, right? Like the courts are connected to the community center, very close proximity to the library, and in the summer where there are a lot of children and other civilian traffic, it's a really tough time with transport. So I think there are maybe facility updates or upgrades that we can also talk at the same time that might impact which entity we award the contract to. So if we can, maybe I'll reach out right after this, and if we can schedule something in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and then we can bring it back at a January work session. Does that work?
Sure.
Okay.
Great.
Whatever your pleasure is, yeah.
That's a great idea. I was going to say that, and there's a lot of information that's been done that can be shared between Steve Campione and Jim Kreckman, and I know Todd Thurston was involved in some of the assessment. Correct me if I'm wrong. One thing I want to say from before, and I've talked to Penfield Security, I envision having a sort of a daytime Penfield security person, because there are issues at the court during the day, the rack and here, and we're trying to get move to that, which will help, because sometimes a lot of the action happens outside of the courtroom when court's in session or when it's not. So I just want to throw it out there.
Go ahead.
I just want to add, I've been at this for 15 years, and I do want to say that the town has been responsive. I've never felt that our concerns for safety have fallen on deaf ears. We've made incremental changes and improvements. And in the spirit of cooperation, go forward and just provide the best security we can for the town.
And I think I'll just finish by adding that we're all aware that we're in a different world now. And there's even been new laws have been enacted for assaults on judges with stiffer penalties and more specific laws about assaulting judges and assaulting other government and court employees. And we are seeing, you'll read about it. I did a little bit of research on it in terms of the escalation of violence in courthouses. It just is a different time now, and I think, social media has a lot to do with it. The media has a lot to do with it. And just, that's also how we get our threats. I have only one person stalking me right now, but at times it's been 2 or 3, and it's often via electronically. So that's something that, is not a court security issue, but it's certainly, I think, indicative of our times, and that we cannot be complacent. I think we get somewhat desensitized when we get to know our defendants who might be a little bit disruptive, and we try to get a good rapport with them, but it can change in a second in the courtroom. So we appreciate your attention and consideration, and hope to have a really good collaboration for the town, the community, and all our facilities.
So I'll reach out to schedule something. All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Judge Molly, I hope you never get older. I will dread the day you retire here.
All right, anything else?
Thank you both.
We've got a good
Thanks.
team over there.
I hope to never see you during your working hours.
They don't like to see, unless they're getting married. They like that's a happy time.
I like seeing you here and in social occasions or
Thank you all.
annual meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the proposed local law to amend Chapter 90.
I know Steve is going to join us. I'm going to kick off with the legal process involved, just to remind everybody at home. There's a proposed amendment to Chapter 90, which deals with animals in general, and the proposed amendments would be addressing some animal control provisions. And so this is the first step. We would be asking to set a public hearing to consider the proposed draft amendments. That public hearing would be scheduled for the February legislative meeting. And so if the town board is, certainly Steve is here to answer any questions, but if you're amenable to moving forward.
I did have a question. I know when this came a couple work sessions ago, we did talk about a couple changes or questions, right, about extermination of dogs and sounding like a very tough penalty in some cases. I did not see red lines. Oh, I'm sorry. There are red lines, but were those addressed?
Yeah, I know that Pete Weissar, our
Yes.
town attorney, and Steve have been working on the language. The version that you saw a few months ago at work session, we didn't compare to that one. This is sort
Okay.
of just, so we can determine. I think there's still provision for the potential for.
So what version is going to the hearing?
The one that you're looking at shows the proposed edits to the current existing town code. So anything that's underlined is added, anything that's a strike through would be removed from the existing code. And I think Steve might be able to.
I can shed a lot of light on a lot of different things here. I'll start out by saying good evening, everybody. Secondarily, at no point do we want to exterminate any dogs. That's not any intent. Again, as Carrie pointed out, that it may have been just a misuse of language. What we're looking at, especially for the one provision that we're looking at, which is 9011 and A, which is I'm sure everyone's noticed, and that's kind of bringing the most concern up and most questions up for everybody else. That is not something that was proposed by myself as say, hey, we need to do this. This was actually something that came up in court. One of the judges had basically asked me, can we do this? Because we have a list of residents in the town that are chronic with violations, multiple violations of the same thing. And there is one city in the state of New York, which is the city of Batavia, that allows this. When I did the research on it, I worked with Agriculture and Markets, working with their legal department and talking to our local individuals for Agriculture and Markets. City of Batavia is the only one on the books in the state of New York that actually has that law, which allows the sheriff in that town to determine who is considered a irresponsible pet owner, and that sheriff makes the determination after however they've worded it, their language, that he can remove the animal from the house for a period of 3 years and then ban that person from owning an animal in the house. The original drafts that I was working with Pete Weishauer on, actually Pete was saying that the animal control officer was going to do that. I said, that's not my job. I'm not a judge and I'm not an attorney. And the optics that it would bring to the town, I think, would be very negative because people could look at things and construe that as I could be biased for one way or another. I would rather have that fall on the judges who are impartial to anything. And this is not anything more than a tool. It gives the courts and the judges latitude that they've not been afforded with such egregious measures that these people have brought forward where the fines don't mean anything to them.
So I don't, and it's totally up to the town, but I don't see all the concerns that I had addressed, and that's why I asked the red lines, Carrie, I couldn't tell. So just, for example, paragraph H, enter buildings or restaurants. So for, unless authorized specifically by the animal dog control officer or supervisor, what jurisdiction does the animal animal dog control officer or supervisor have to a private restaurant? Why are we policing whether or not a private owner for a restaurant would allow a dog in?
Okay, so
What if they don't, what if the supervisor, I'm just saying, what if he doesn't respond quickly enough? What's the enforcement arm?
Okay, so the history behind that one was because of something that happened in this building.
But this is a public
I understand.
building.
I
It also
understand.
includes restaurants. What jurisdiction
Right.
do we have for a
And
restaurant?
originally, it also had cemeteries in it as
Yep.
well, which we had removed.
So we struck that.
So
Why is restaurants still here?
The restaurants it falls under the health department, which I also answer to the health department, also under New York State Agriculture and Markets Law, which also coincides with the ADA, which recognizes that guide dogs, service dogs, or PTSD dogs are allowed, right? That's what this, and I had the language put in service dogs, because service dogs does encompass
Oh, yeah.
service, guide, and PTSD.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
originally it was just for guide dogs. The reason that it falls under animal control and then the supervisor, animal control being the primary on that, is because we know what the laws are, we know what we're going to be looking for. As far as your concern about private restaurants, that falls under the health department, which they.
I agree it falls under the health department.
But
so-
we also answer to the health department, to New York State Health Department.
But that's not what the proposed law says. It doesn't say unless authorized by the health department. It's-
No, but that's what I'm saying, is we answer to the health department, and that's part of health law. So because it involves a dog, if somebody calls in and says that they've got a dog that they're bringing into a restaurant, and they claim that dog is a service dog, and it's a Chihuahua, and the dog's acting up, it's barking at people, it's, biting people, that's not a service dog. Okay?
Yep.
And I'm trying to answer your question.
Yes, yep.
With respect to it, it's not going to go to the sheriff's department, because the sheriff's department's going to call me. They're going to defer to my expertise and my training on it. And, we do get calls, quite frequently, we get calls and requests on this. But this was, H has always been on the books in the town.
So I'm not trying to fight with you on this.
Sure.
I'm just, the way I read it and the way I would interpret it is the owner or manager, whoever of the restaurant, they would have to be the first person to either deny service to that person, the irresponsible owner under this
Correct.
definition, right? And then it would default to some other person with some other authority. I just don't
Such
like the way
as?
this was written, and that was the concern that I had voiced. I understand Mr. Weischer had a conflict tonight, and I understand we're not adopting it tonight. I also had raised 2 other concerns that I don't see addressed here, which were, and I know that the town, I know you are not exterminating dogs if we have 3 penalties, but it did say that the dog would be confiscated. Where are these dogs going? Right? And I presumed, I think that was a concern that I shared, if they're going to be taken to a shelter and the town has no responsibility for it, but I have absolutely no idea, again, and I'm not, it was just a question. If the kennels or shelters or some other place get too full, what happens? They're exterminated. And it seemed like a very severe penalty, and under the other town code where I think there were monetary fines, here I thought like, ooh, geez, can we line up the fines a little bit better? And I think Pete was going to look into that. I understand we're not adopting it tonight. You're just asking for a hearing.
Yep.
So I'm okay with scheduling the hearing. I don't know how others feel, but this is something that I would want at least the public to have input or thoughts on, or the actual dog owners. I don't, so it won't impact me, but these are just concerns generally that I see with the law that is not clearly defined, and in my view seems a little bit harsh.
Again, I'm not saying that I agree or disagree with you. This is used more as a tool to give the courts and the judges latitude to basically state at a point when they're dealing with the same people over and over and over again for egregious violations of our town codes. And I've got 7 people right off the top of my head that we've had in front of both judges multiple times in a standing year. And it is to the point of, okay, they keep getting dogs, they keep having violations. These dogs are not treated all that great, not in every single case, but in a lot of cases. That said, when the judges inquired about it, looked into it, and it is on the books, can it be modified? Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's what we're here for. So.
But there has to be something that the judges have that has some teeth into it, that can even just go as far as by stating, if you look at certain things like an armed officer, it is a visual deterrent. This is just an extra added deterrent to somebody that doesn't care about the monetary fines. And as far as what your request was about the monetary fines, New York State Agriculture and Markets does have
They do.
heights and limits to what we can fine people.
Yep.
So the judges, once they reach that max, the people still do it. Where do you go from there?
So Candace, it sounds like we potentially would move for a public hearing, but we
Yep.
need to tweak the language and
We
get
could.
Pete's
The
input.
fines are capped, but the license registration fee is not, it's currently, I think, artificially low for persons that are repeat offenders, right?
The license and registration fee has nothing to do with offenses because that's dealt differently.
I understand, but for persons that are irresponsible dog owners, when you take the dog away, but like you said, they can keep getting more dogs.
No. Under this provision, no, it wouldn't. I apologize.
They currently could get additional dogs. The town at the same time can make it prohibitively expensive for persons that are truly irresponsible repeat offenders, like flagrant offenders. I just don't want to punish dogs for bad humans. But anyway, if there's no other objection, I would like to make a motion for the public hearing to be scheduled.
I would just ask one thing. I didn't see any appeal process in here.
Oh, that was the other thing. Thank you.
Yeah, that if this does happen, what's the appeal process for an owner who thinks that, no, I didn't do all these things? Is that something for us to include, or?
Let me take a look really quick at the existing law, because right
Okay.
now this is only affecting these couple of provisions, and
Right.
later in the chapter, it likely has.
Okay.
While Carrie's looking that up, Candace, I'm just curious, of the items that you did raise previously, are you comfortable that they are covered under this, or are you
I don't think
suggesting
they are,
that?
because it was the restaurants, and then I just personally, I just don't like putting jurisdiction in two humans, right?
Right.
And I understand that you have purview under Department of Health. I totally get all that, but the way that it's written, so I'm okay with it going to a hearing. If this is what came to me to adopt, I would not be.
That's what I'm wondering is are we premature with the hearing if there's still work to be done in this draft?
I don't know, maybe nobody interprets it the way that I do, so we can schedule it for hearing, and if nobody, barks about it, just, okay, bring it to our...
No
I
punishment.
think part of the language of that with restaurants means that
you
you're
caught
right,
it?
that it is private, and the restaurant owners will deal with that, and once they get to a certain level, they contact law enforcement, which we get down there and we address the situation. We assess each case as it delivers itself.
Is that in, I'm sorry, I'll interrupt to say that there is a penalties for offenses section in, it's 90-10.
Yep.
And so it does indicate, but I don't see a due process. In other words, that an appeal process, so we can, one thought or suggestion would be if the appeals component needs to be added or looked at, do you want to, we have time because there's going to be another work session in January. We'd have enough time to set the public, we could set the public hearing now, but still have time to, if you needed to look at a change or an update, you'd have time to do that.
I think 90-10 wasn't included because no changes were being made to that, but maybe when we publish it, if you include that, then folks can read
Yep.
it in context.
Okay.
Yeah, I did not go in to look at the rest of it.
Yep.
I focused on that.
Yeah, so if that could be an update that gets shared or gets addressed and then advertised as part of the,
So still looking for a second?
So I'll second, yeah, I'll second that motion.
Okay, vote, please. Do we need to vote?
Barry?
Yeah.
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
Leenhouts?
Aye.
Aye.
Teglash?
Aye.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me. And hopefully we can get this worked out, and I can answer more of the questions. I'm more than happy to work with Peter Weishauer even further, and then if the judges are amiable to it, I'll be happy to work with them, that we can adjust language that will be happy to everybody, because at the end of the day, my job is to make sure we have a positive outcome for all the animals in the town of Penfield.
Oh, thank
Very
you.
good.
Absolutely.
What you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Have a good night.
You too.
Drive safe.
Okay, we'll move on to 47 Willow Pond Special Use Permit application. Carrie?
yes. So earlier this month, the public hearing was conducted with the town board for the special use permit associated with the proposed development of the 47 Willow Pond Way. I'll just for everybody's visual aid, this is the proposed new development at this site. As you'll recall, there is a 2003 approved project of a 150-unit skilled nursing facility that's already approved for the site and could move forward. The owners of the property have a new development plan and are seeking the special use permit associated with this. Subsequent to the public hearing, the applicant did provide responses. Those were furnished to the town board. 2 memos were prepared, one providing general comments and one focused on transportation improvements. I also shared some of the background material that was provided to the planning board. The draft transportation committee memo, that I say draft because it doesn't get formally approved until the next transportation committee meeting in February. And New York State DOT's review of the project. I'm trying to think of other subsequent information that might have come in. There was a seeker documentation was also provided in the packet for tonight's meeting, and I'm happy to go through that with you. Just for everybody's memory, this is and I'm circling it because it's in black and white and not the pretty color picture that we just saw a second ago. But this is the development that's currently approved for the property. The property owners are hoping to move forward with a new plan. And
Carrie,
that
can we
is-
leave that on site?
I sure can, yeah.
And there, I'm sorry, is there something more visually?
You want the larger aerial of the whole PD?
Be
No,
great
it's-
if you could overlay
I
that
was
on
going to say,
top
Carrie,
of
can you
the...
just snap your fingers and overlay those for us?
Here to read.
Yeah, I mean, I'll zoom in so you can sort of see. Oh, you mean things like,
Well, it's a much bigger footprint, the assisted living, than the current
Yeah.
proposed.
So is there a way, Carrie, to
side by side?
side by side, thank you.
Yeah.
And I don't really need the sorry, guys, the 2-story office building.
Yep.
I just want to see the footprint of what's currently approved
Yep.
versus the revised.
and we'll zoom in so that it match sort of the scale-ish.
And is there going to be any, looks like Mark 4 has like a whole contingency tonight. Is there anybody that's going to be available to answer questions? We sure will. Okay, do you want to, okay. Only to the extent that it's, that we have one or have a question. And I'm sorry if we don't totally look in your direction with it being a work session. It's primarily for the board to kind of work through things, but it's just, thank you. Good to have, sorry, I'm sprawled out over kind of hot. Thank you. Can't function without a pink highlighter. Okay. All right. So we've got the side-by-side. I have notes from the public hearing, and I just want to at least draw up the, I know we've gotten a million emails, but it's easier for me when I compiled the notes for myself and I had distributed it to the board, right? So for the public hearing, we had Wendy speak, Jenny M., Susan K., Laura P., Linda, Mary. There were several submissions submitted online. Laura Ottavino, Lindsay Principi, Richard G., Kristen T. And the summary of those generally were the 3-story versus 2-story, traffic, and just general traffic public safety concerns. So I don't know how the board wants to tackle it. Do you guys want to take those issues turn by turn? Do we want to go through the elements of the special use permit? Any thoughts?
One thing I was going to say is Mark could address some of the traffic. So some of the proposed changes are going to the, I was going to say the traffic committee, but that's the wrong term. But do you want to hit those, if that's okay?
If the board wants to.
Any strong feelings from the?
It does not matter, though.
All right, so I do want to hit traffic, but Carrie, can you help us, let's put everything into context, and I know you're trying to summarize 15 years here, but so, okay.
Yes.
So that place is already zoned, and this is the last part of that zoned development, right?
Correct. So the PD dates back to the 1970s. I'm going to go brief history. Mark IV was not the original developer. Mark IV purchased the development midway after it was stalled, and took over probably mid-70s, late 70s, early 80s. All approvals were already granted. The parcel in question at 47, there was various iterations through the years. The most current one dates to 2003, and it included, and I know you didn't want to see the other plan, but it included this building and this one office building. The other office building already existed. The project moved forward within the time required of that, the granted approval. It was Planning Board's preliminary approval, Town Board special use permit was granted, final approval by the Planning Board was issued, construction of the second office building commenced within the time period, and because they were joined projects, that means that this building could be built today and would just need to proceed to building permit with no board revisiting.
So is there anything in terms of either planning board or town board as a last step for what's already approved before the build?
No.
Before the build?
They have to provide architecture and engineering plans that meet the building department standards for review, for code review.
But in terms of actual permits or anything?
No.
So the assisted living is
live.
Their
Live,
site plan was
green light.
preserved, so they can
Okay.
just
Right.
proceed right to a building permit if they so choose.
If we were going still, or if it was.
If they wanted to build that, they wouldn't be here. They would be at the building department getting their permits and then going ahead with that construction.
And to confirm that the density of what's already approved is 150 units, right?
Correct.
And there was no other variance sought in terms of building height for what's already approved?
No.
Okay. And then,
Or any variances for that matter. So like setbacks and things, that was all navigated between the planning board and the town board. So planning board reviewed the site plan, the layout, the massing, layout of setbacks from things, and town board issued the special use permit, noting the planning board's review. And I can always provide those past resolutions if that's helpful.
For the assisted living.
For the assisted living, correct.
Just going to keep saying.
I know.
For
we have
people
to-
watching,
I
just
know,
to be
there's a-
clear.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So just like keep it simple for me. It's really like Plan A, Plan B, or do nothing and then
So the
risk repercussions with the town, right?
So when you're looking at the special use permit, you're really comparing the proposed use now to what was previously approved, right? Because we haven't approved this, the assisted living is an approved project. So as you're evaluating the special use permit, you're not evaluating it compared to nothing. You're evaluating it, how does it compare to what was already approved? Is the use, the proposed use, consistent with our overall PD? We have a multifamily residential being proposed in a planned development district that already has multifamily residential in it and built.
Yep, so, and I studied this already, but I just want to confirm, because I'm reading things too late at night. So for the new proposed plan.
Yes.
The town has to also complete its seeker, which I understand that the internal staff have completed. Planning board already declared it a negative declaration, which multiple criteria, but it means for impact to the soil. Mark, help me.
They do impacts to air, impacts to traffic, all the things that were in the draft. Seeker, here, I can pull that up for
We can pull up the categories just to.
And I will share, so bear with me
There was
for a minute.
something that they said that I wanted to highlight.
So we're doing, for this, each board, the planning board is looking at the physical layout, physical build-out of the project. And so they looking things like impact to land, impact to stormwater, impact to.
Stormwater, that's what I was thinking. So one of the residents, and I think just general concern was, right, you're going to be digging stuff up, right, and building something. Like, we all agree, something is going to be built. It's not going to stay empty space, right?
Correct.
So something is going to be built, and there were concerns generally about how's that going to impact water flow to my house? Is my basement going to be flooded, et cetera? And I know that was vetted with engineering department, right?
Correct.
Anything by Mark 4 and any changes there?
No.
So no negative impacts with the soil, drain water, and you've already spoken to those residents, right? I believe you submitted supplemental materials to that extent.
That is correct,
Okay.
yes.
And so then I was looking at next the overall footprint for the proposed plan. I mean, this is really hard to tell, so like I'm looking to Carrie and Mark. Can we confirm that the overall square footage is less with the
It is.
proposed plan? And I mean, it's hard to tell because one's black and white versus color. Talk to us about green space. What does the proposed, does that increase, decrease, stay the same?
I believe that the green space increases in the proposed, this proposed application. Clearly, the footprint of the building is smaller, and there's more, the way it's laid out is been brought to the center of the parcel to allow for a larger setback to the neighboring properties. I believe.
So they shrank the footprint of the building, and that's part of the reason why they're going to 3 stories, is if you can do 2 stories, you're spreading the buildings out, you're closer to the neighbors, you're covering more land area. If you can go up, and I believe it's a 5-foot change, that 5-foot change, now they've basically consolidated the footprint of the building, so now you have more room for green space, more room for trees and other vegetation.
The density is higher, though.
They're coming back with 88 units. The original was 150 units. So
Right.
comparing senior living versus apartments, but how do you?
Comparison, right? I mean, apartments, you're not going to have assisted living, you're likely going to have one person per bed.
And a
So
support.
most are double occupancy beds.
The
So when you
units.
say 150 beds,
So 150 units, which is typically a double occupancy. So I think you would have up to 300.
assisted living?
Most are a 2-bed
I
situation.
haven't seen that. All right.
With additional staff, I would guess, too.
And then obviously they'd have 3 24-hour, 3-shift staffing to service that.
Not all at the same time, though.
No, not all at the same time, but I say as they're rotating in and out.
I don't mean to be contradictory, but that seems to be the opposite of what was said at the last meeting. And my sister's lived in 3 assisted living so far, and none of them have had double rooms.
I'll let the applicant speak to.
Mark IV was one of the largest operators of assisted living facilities in the area up until 2017, and we absolutely did have, probably don't know if majority or more, but many and most of the rooms were double occupancy.
So the intent of the original was to have 300 people there.
It was to have 150 units. Just like we're proposing 88 units, we're not proposing a number of people or a number of beds, for lack of a better term. We're proposing 88 units. Some of those units will be 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom. You might have a 3-bedroom unit operated by one person or occupied by one person. With the 150-unit assisted living facility, it's not a 150-bed assisted living facility, and they have the ability to have more than one bed per unit. So there was never a proposal for a number of people. It's a number of units.
With that original plan, or and I know it's like an old plan, but is there any way to tell how it abuts to any neighbors that may have either, that exists there today, is what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah,
Yeah, because it does appear to have more green space between the one building and the yard or the lots behind it, right?
Because I see the lot lines,
right.
right? Yeah, and
And there
you
you
can kind of
can see
see,
'em.
yeah.
yeah, I do apologize. The lack of a color rendering makes
It's
it a little
hard,
bit
yeah.
difficult
But
to.
Okay.
It gives a rough idea. I mean, there was a lady that had shared that one of the concerns, where currently she looks out of her bedroom window and there's nothing, but, her concern was looking into somebody, right? But I
Or somebody looking onto that, yeah.
either way, right?
Right.
I would think with a smaller footprint, you have more of a buffer with the residents, right? And with the vegetation that they added versus the larger footprint. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
To have our landscape consultant look at it, he did recommend staggered trees, so to have, pine trees or for year-round coverage kind of on the bottom, and then staggered taller trees in the back for, taller buffer with that. So he provided that recommendation to them, and they've incorporated that into their.
Right.
If I may, can I just add one point of information? In comparing those two drawings that you're looking at your screen, they are at different scales.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So the black and white version is at a 40 scale versus the colored version is at a 50 scale.
Okay.
So,
What does that mean in plain English?
that's what I was going to say. So basically.
Engineers.
Yes.
But the distances, I mean, yes,
So
you
you-
can't
it's not
compare
a-
those two.
Correct.
But what I'm questioning is the distance south of the building.
Right.
There appears to be more space. I don't see parking there. So there does seem to be more space between that building and the yard south of it. It doesn't matter that that model's bigger or smaller than the other model.
It does, because on the black and white version, 1 inch represents 40 lineal feet, okay?
So how many, and tell me in numbers
And
then.
then on the colored version, 1 inch represents 50 lineal feet.
I think,
So
Okay.
tell me what the
I think we have
measurements
a
are.
distance on both of those, do we not?
Correct.
So if you've
In
got a
the fact
distance,
that
you can zoom in on the one, you've got the distance to the building, and then we should have
Yeah.
the site plan.
The buildings on the,
I brought my glasses. Can't see.
the building on the black and white version, the original version, was set back, I believe, and actually, if you can
Carrie,
blow
if
it
you
up,
can
I think it
zoom
was
in
around
on-
50
Yeah, I'm
feet,
going to get there.
First.
Oh,
and that's labeled there.
Yeah, so 60 feet.
Okay. And then, I believe, in the proposed building,
I'm going to pull it up for you now.
So 50 on the original?
I think it's at 60.
60 feet,
60
the
on the
building is.
original.
Feet, sorry.
Right.
But then the change that was made is the building is 60 feet, and then you have the access drive to the south of that. And that building, and that distance from that roadway from the property line, which is the available area for the landscaping, is actually smaller than what's provided on the rendered, colored site plan. And that's why we were able, we were cognizant of that to increase that buffer area so that it could be landscaped more robustly.
So going back to it, the measurement from the building to the neighbor's property line is 60 feet on the original. On the new plan, it is what, from the building to the property line? How many feet is that?
Thanks,
Because
Linda.
having a building next to the neighbor's yard that's 3 stories high versus a driveway or just a path, a service road, whatever, where nobody's right on top of me is different. And that's where the buffer of the trees would certainly work better. Those trees are going to have to take a lot of growing for 3 stories.
While Peter's looking that up, Mark, I assume ponds weren't required back when this initial plan was put in place, or
So not in the 70s, no. So
What was the
original,
question about?
whether ponds were
Ponds
required back in the day?
Oh, the retention, that's a...
back in the 70s, they weren't. In the 90s, 2000s, they were dry ponds, I remember, and then in the mid-2000s, they switched over to be what you look at now as,
Right.
a retention pond that holds water. This is a kind of a modified version.
Is there protection around it? Fencing, something?
This one, they're actually, and we've sat with them to go through it, because they're actually proposing it's kind of a modified version, so it's a combination between a pond and almost like a rain garden, so there isn't as much standing water, just because knowing it's in a neighborhood. So they've got some underground drainage in it, so they're proposing and actually making the facility more costly, but trying to reduce having standing water, just being in a neighborhood like
So
that. So
you're not going to have feet of water?
in a rainstorm, you will. After the rainstorm's gone, it'll percolate in, and it'll go back to being more of a field meadow look to it. So
It's just, I worried about that because
Yep.
that's so close to where kids are
that was a
walking,
concern of us
dogs
as
are-
well, and that's, we said, okay, how do we do this? Can we do underground storage?
All right,
You've
good.
got to look at both water quality and quantity, so, we met with them and said, okay, how are we going to handle this? And they're proposing a more advanced design. So yes, in a storm event, you will have water, but once it's
Okay.
over, it'll,
So tell me when
Coming
it's
down
empty, it's been a dry summer, what's the depth? What is the difference between standing and the depth of that?
I believe it should, Mike's here,
it
but I
will
think
be
it should
dry.
drain down, so it almost looks like a field meadow.
Okay,
with-
so it's not a
similar-
foot, 2 feet, or anything?
Similar to what it looks like today.
It'll be a depressed area, but it has
Right.
underdrain underneath
Like
it.
a
so it-
swell,
So it
essentially.
can dry out and have wildflowers growing in it, and then it'll grow back up, or, fill back in when a rainstorm
Okay.
comes.
Do we have anything somewhere in Penfield, or that we could look at, or that I could look at, that takes that model? Another building that y'all may have?
Jackson Road, behind,
I mean, you've,
And you don't have to answer.
I mean, and you kind of had Autumn Oak was a little bit similar like
Yeah,
that. We've just, so that's, that one kind of just fills up in a storm event and then drains down. So it's just kind of a depressed
Yeah.
area.
Kind of thing.
That one we did add in the Rudy Neufeld's new development, he did add some deep pools in it, so that modified that one slightly. I equate it more to a rain garden. So if
Okay.
you see the town hall rain
Yeah,
garden,
yeah.
if you've been back there,
Right.
it's quite overgrown right now. In a
All
storm event, that fills up with water. Once it's done, it goes back down, and then you've got plants and
All right, so
other
heavy
vegetation.
storm comes in, that thing fills up,
Yep.
and when it drains, however, it's going to be taken care of, it's not going to flood into the land of the neighbors, where then it goes into their basement?
No.
Okay. Good.
So, Linda,
I took us off track,
No,
so
no,
I'm
no,
sorry. Okay.
you reminded me of something. I wanted to clarify. So the 3-story versus 2-story, the building height for where it is above the 35 feet limit, right? It's not all portions of the proposed.
Come on.
Go ahead. The architect can answer the question to that effect.
I was like, what? Am I safe? What's up?
Craig Jensen from CJS Architects.
Bringing in the
here.
experts of each
Okay.
piece.
Right, so did I read that correctly, that not every portion of the building would exceed the 35 feet?
Yeah, it's only in, so we're trying to break up the facade into kind of smaller pieces, so it has like a scale that's more compatible with smaller developments, right? So the facade has parapet walls that extend above the roof.
I don't know if they can hear you.
Oh, sorry. Is this on?
Yep. Just pull it forward.
Okay. So we have parapet walls around the building that extend above the roof to screen some mechanical equipment and create some variety. Like, so the profile line of the top of the building is varied and creates kind of more interesting overall look to the building. So yeah, there are portions that are higher than 35 and then others that are not, yeah.
But I had to look this up because I didn't know what parapet meant, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure. So for the portions that are higher than 35 feet, and can you confirm for me again how much higher it would be by?
Yeah, I think it goes up to about 40 feet.
So 5 feet,
5 feet,
right?
yeah,
Above,
that's right.
of the,
Yeah.
above the threshold. And that's only to make you happy as an architect?
Yeah.
It's just visual variety?
So it creates a visual, variety that's going to make the building scale down into smaller pieces. And it's going to screen some equipment on the roof, which
Yes,
is going to be a
but
good thing.
That's what I wanted to clarify.
Right.
It's not additional living space.
No, it's
We're not
not.
cramming in more people.
No, that's right,
And
no.
so
It's purely for the aesthetic
It's
benefit.
aesthetic. So for livable space,
Right.
is it fair to say it's two-story?
No, it's 3 stories.
I was going to say, that looks like
So
three
where
stories.
is it?
It's 3
So I know
stories.
it's three.
It's 3 stories essentially throughout, but if we had a, thank you.
Are there
If we put a pitched roof on a 2-story building, we'd kind of be about the same height as we're at now. So by putting a flat roof on the building, we can keep the height down, but a flat roof that's uniformly flat is going to
Yep.
look, I think, out of context. So by varying the
Does this help? Do you
walls
see
around the
the,
building, we create a more animated look to the building without the pitched roof, right?
So I get that. Maybe I am mistaking with my notes. So I was thinking of the two end buildings.
Right.
Am I misremembering? Was there some portions where not every floor was rented unit space? Am I not remembering this correctly?
yeah, I think it's always been, if you see the red line, that's the dashed line, shows the 35-foot building height and where that's located. And the end units and in the middle, or the ends of the building and in the middle, it exceeds that height to provide that architectural
And to mark-
variation.
Just variety. I
Right,
mean,
it
I
marks
get
the
that.
entry, it kind of marks the corners, it kind of creates a little bit more of a community out.
Oh,
So
there might
I
be
will-
Yeah,
garages.
what's on the ends then when there's no windows? Is that some kind of storage? Is that like?
Yeah,
a
maybe,
utility
in
garage?
garages
those
on the lower
locations,
level.
it's probably storage, yeah.
stairwell?
Yeah, and there are some recessed balconies, so, there are areas that the building steps back, so it may appear like it's only 1 or 2 stories here, but eventually it does scale up to the 3 stories.
Okay.
And then this was material that was provided in the packet of information, but this is
Yep.
information provided during the planning board's review of the project.
But the office buildings that are next door, they have a pitched
Those are
roof,
sight
and
lines.
essentially it will equate to the same overall kind of mass.
Look and feel.
Right. Well, this is going to feel like a smaller scale because of the way it's broken down, but in terms of the overall height, or the visual kind of mass, the flat roof takes a lot of that away, so it'll kind of even up to the adjacent building.
So I know that there was also an alternate site plan of the 2-story, but I mean, that's where I was conflicted because there are some things that then you trade, right?
Yeah, so that was as pointed out previously, if we spread these units over 2 stories and you still do 80 units or 88, you're going to end up with a lot more lot coverage, and you're going to be closer to the adjacent properties, and I think the overall impact's going to be greater, whereas this, the building footprints are very consistent with what's on the street now. They kind of match up with the office buildings.
You're talking about when you're looking at it from 250, not
Yeah,
from the
no, but from anywhere, just the overall density of the development is going
Right.
to appear
Okay.
less because you've got
441, sorry.
less footprint.
We knew what you meant.
One of them.
You got good eyesight.
Yeah. Right. And, go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
And the reason it has to be 3 stories with 88 units is just economic for you, right? You can't make the money with the 2-story to make it
Well, the number
a
of-
good return on investment.
The number of units is economic. We can fit 88 units within the code on this site in 2 stories.
Right, but you
You're gonna
have
have
to
the
do
exact-
the 88 units, is what I'm saying. Is
Yes.
that the
Yeah,
economic
that's our number.
decision?
Yeah, that was the number. So it's really about how do you best place 88 units on the site? And we really think 3 stories is a better way to place them.
Gotcha.
It gives you a better overall project.
I mean, alternatively, they could proceed with the higher number of units, right?
There's the two-story.
This is the old,
But I just,
Talking about for apartment units.
like, why couldn't it be
Yeah.
44 or 60 or
Oh,
something was my question.
I mean, yeah, so this is my.
Oh, this was the,
the
This is
old,
the two-story.
Yeah, two-story,
Yeah.
three buildings.
With
And
three
they
buildings.
Split into three buildings. And, sorry, I'm like,
No,
I'm not trying to be rude,
no, you're
cutting you
fine.
off, I'm just.
It's your meeting.
So
I
mean,
get that. I see
There's
that.
like trade-offs, right? Like
Sure.
buffering to neighbors, the green space, and just overall, like, I guess.
It's very
feel
compact,
like-
yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be
the
much harder to
parking
achieve the
space.
buffers with the.
Of course, we don't have all the nice aesthetics on that first one.
I didn't even know what parapet meant.
Oh, there you go.
You learn cool architect terms.
Yeah. So I did also want to talk about mostly with Mark on sidewalks and traffic and just pedestrian safety. And I mean, we all drive there. We like know that there's
yeah.
some concerns. And I appreciated at least the public commentary on Sanders Farm Road, and I understand where Willow Pond comes, but that's like on the opposite side of the street. So I just want to confirm, like, my understanding, is that part of this application? That street?
Sanders Farm is not. It's in the general vicinity, but is not directly being connected to with this
The
application.
connection's there, right?
no, I'll
Sanders
show.
Farm to 441, but not this project to
Well,
Sanders
the
Farm.
neighborhood. So you
Correct,
come
yes.
in Sanders Farm to get,
Correct.
yes.
Sure.
Could you go back to, I'm going to take us a bit off track. Could you just go back to that, what you had up?
oh, sorry.
Yeah, and can you go over a little bit to those office buildings?
Well, it's
Yeah.
It's grayed
okay.
out.
The one thing I just wanted to ask is, at the last meeting, we talked about, you put in that additional entry-exit way because of the emergency vehicles and to have an additional. I was just thinking, that is not flat there, right? Between those two buildings, a truck can't go from the beginning. There's a, see right there, where they're parked here?
Here? Are
No,
we talking about
over.
here?
Go to your whatever.
Oh, down? Or do you mean over here?
Your
There's a-
left, my right.
Oh,
Still further over
Yeah,
between.
so what we're saying is, yes, we've made it for the emergency vehicle to go in, but the only way is over here to wind in through this parking lot.
here, I'm going to go to an aerial so we can.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Right?
There's a ditch there.
Yeah,
there
it's
is-
different elevation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't want to make them a direct connect since it's a divided entrance on Willow Pond Way.
No,
wouldn't want-
no, I don't, I'm not asking for anything to go onto 441 or anything. I just want to make sure the comprehension is there, that an emergency vehicle isn't just going to be able to come in and make a left and a right. They're going to have to weave. Because if that was the same elevation, they could go straight to the back of those buildings and get in. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, that's some clarifying. I mean, they're going to have their own new curb cut off of Willow Pond Way.
Right, that's number one.
Yep, so is dealing, in talking with fire, if there was, so they've got Alder Lane as their second connection. So we said, hey, if there is ever an accident or something at their new curb cut,
Would come in here.
can you come in this way? And yes, it'd be a little circuitous route. If
It's just a
secondary
very
route in, the main route
Okay.
would be their new curb cut, but saying, hey, if there is ever an accident there, people need to get in, people need to get out, let's have a secondary means of egress. That's
I
just-
worry about fire.
Can we talk about an additional egress, egress?
I mean, the grades wouldn't allow it to connect to 441.
And
So
neither would
you're well
DOT.
below it, and then you're into a turn lane, you've got a trap lane that, you're dropping people off into Willow Pond Way, so it wouldn't work on 441. And then you've got a divided entrance on Willow Pond Way, so it doesn't quite work. in a
Consider at least discuss.
We've looked at that, and then, how to
Okay.
do it. We do have letters from DOT. The planning board did refer it to the
What
Transportation
about
Committee.
emergency services?
And the fire marshal
We've
weighed
talked to
in.
the fire marshal through PRC, and that's where that initial comment came, is
Right.
let's make an interconnection between the medical office buildings and this new apartment, so they have cross-access. We'll make sure there's cross-access easements, shared parking agreements, so if there's ever a need for overflow in either way, either one, they can go either side. This was also referred from the planning board to the Transportation Committee. So we just talked about it at the this past week's Transportation Committee meeting. We did look at it. Again, we're comparing not from empty space, we're comparing from what was proposed to what the new proposal is. So there's an increase of 1 car per hour from what is approved of the assisted living facility to the new apartments. So that was the change in the traffic study. It went to the state DOT. Obviously, there's a traffic light at Willow Pond Way, so the state didn't see any need for a change on their end. One of the things, and Carrie's pulling this up in the aerial photo, in one of our recent oil and stones of Willow Pond Way, Crown Oak, the crosswalks got painted over. So that's something that the residents have brought up with a concern, and that's definitely, as soon as spring comes and the weather improves, we'll go spray that. The Transportation Committee, and this will be something I'll be back before the town board in January, is looking at a guideline for when to put in, they're called the RFBs, or the flashing beacons. So as you go by a school, you press the button and then the flashers come on. We're coming up a policy of everybody wants them. You need to have kind of some process procedure of where, how many cars, pedestrians walking. So this is the spot we're going to look at as soon as we get that policy adopted. Look at, does that make sense in this location here?
And I would add that that's a wider than normal crossing area, and you can lose people. I drive that regularly, and you can, in the darkness, you can lose people.
And we've looked at the lighting in that area. I know there was an incident, a couple years ago. We did look at lighting in the area off the end of that island with our new.
There are no signs right there. Are there stop signs or anything at the Crown Oak Willow Pond?
No, this is the full drive, and there's stop signs here.
There's stop signs on the side
On the
streets.
other side.
Side streets, but it's a
runway.
Full flow in.
It is a runway, as far as people are.
It is a wider entrance, but with a divided entrance, then it ends up to be a wider piece to kind of match up with it on the southern end of Willow Pond Way to that.
So what can we do to not make it a runway?
Yeah.
I think, because that was a lot of the public concern also, right? And so
I'll just say it's part of the Transportation Committee. It's not, and what I'm going to say is it's not just this intersection. We're talking about a lot of different spots. The one thing I'd say with the flashing, the one concern I have sometimes is that it'll give a false sense of security for someone crossing. And where I live, I've seen somebody wait diligently and cars keep going by. I mean, so
Still,
it's kind of
it still helps.
Oh, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it.
And honestly, this to me is still the biggest issue. There is a public welfare and safety concern.
So what can we do
here?
We'll look at, obviously, striped or enhanced crosswalks. So there are high-vis crosswalks. You can do the in-street signs. So as you've ever seen kind of in the middle of the road, those obviously aren't out in the wintertime. During plow season, those can go in. We'll look at the flashing lights for pedestrian crossing in that area.
So I saw the traffic study, and I saw a suggestion, potential suggestion for speed bumps, like every 50 feet. Is that something that's possible here for Willow Pond Way?
That is not something the Transportation Committee is supportive of.
Can you explain to me why?
We only have one spot in town. They're not the
Huntington Meadow?
Huntington Meadow is our only street that have them. They create unintended issues around them. People don't like them, so they drive around them. So if you go to Huntington Meadows, people have rocks. They have posts. They have other stuff because they don't want to go over them, so they go around them. So they go up in people's lawns. People race between them. People try to fly over them. They're a pain to plow.
What do you mean by pain to plow? Like, what is?
You can't plow through them.
You can't, with an angled plow blade, you can't get over them, so you've got to send special equipment down there to plow Huntington Meadow, different than we do anywhere else. So we have requests for speed humps on pretty much every street in town. We do have a policy for it of when and where we put them in. The Transportation Committee did not believe they're warranted here. This is.
So hold on, I want to stay on that for a moment, and I'm not trying to. For those that spoke at the public hearing, I don't want to consistently call them by name, but there was a lady that had talked about plowing in that neighborhood and how there was a portion of the private road that was plowed previously. So talk to me, if we do try to put speed bumps like every 50 feet along Willow Pond Way, that's a town road, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
So it's currently plowed. I see the track there.
Yep.
So is that something you're telling me that DPW then would not plow that neighborhood?
We would
Or
have
would
to,
not be able
we
to?
would have to plow it with different plow equipment than what
Do we have that equipment today?
We do, but we'd have to send a special run to do it because an angled plow does not easily get over a square speed hump. So it just adds different, I mean, people request them every day, and we would have them on every street in town. You would have them. This area, in particular, Willow Pond Way, if people drive around them, they're in people's basically front
Yeah,
lawn. You're moving the problem from the road. Yes, there may be a speeding problem, or yes, be a concern of a speeding problem. We've put the speed card out there. We've had the feedback, card out there at times. The plowing concern was regarding, at least to my understanding, was in regards to sidewalks.
Yeah.
And this is one that we talked previously about, the board, was Devonshire's. We used to plow that sidewalk as a neighborhood street. We no longer plow it. The board reaffirmed that a month or two ago, that we're not going to plow that, because that rolls into, we need
That's
2 and 3 more sidewalk plows, because then if we plow this neighborhood street, then sidewalk, not street, if we plow this neighborhood sidewalk, then we need to plow every other neighborhood sidewalk in town, and that would add.
No, I don't want to confuse you. You're confusing me with sidewalks and like main roads. I mean, people need to get out to go to work, school, et cetera. So I'm just trying to think of different solutions to address that problem. So I guess Transportation Committee, as experts, I defer to them. So speed bumps are out. What else can we put there? Like, can we put more flashing? What about those speed signs that like say, hey, slow down, crazy, you're going 60, like in,
Yep, and we've
35
had portable ones. We've not had a fixed one. We did have it for a time there. We have one that we move around town. So as needs, concerns come up, we move it to different spots.
So in an effort to help this board address some of the concerns or perceived concerns about speeding from the neighbors on Willow Pond Way, and keep in mind, we're one of the largest neighbors on Willow Pond Way currently. We have Willow Pond Apartments, and we want this to be a safe area for our new tenants and our current tenants and our neighbors. We've put forth a proposal to purchase for the town speed feedback signs for that portion of the neighborhood between our property and Sanders Farm. We've offered speed cushions or speed bumps. Any of this that the Transportation Committee and Town Engineer want, we're happy to provide so that the neighbors have that comfort level, and this board can look them in the eye and say, we address this concern.
Well, you're contributing money. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I just make a quick point? Sometimes it takes me a while to get to the point, which is that I don't know if this is a 47 Willow Pond issue. I'm just saying this same conversation's happening all over town within the Transportation Committee. So I look at it as a little bit of a separate issue. Now maybe this will enhance, but we're having this conversation at every transportation on signage, and I think of Scribner, where we're going to go to a double stop sign. There's a whole process we go through because people, we're getting complaints on people blowing through the signs. This is happening all over town. So I'm just making a point that this conversation's happening in other neighborhoods, other intersections. It's being addressed by transportation. That's all.
But somebody's offered money, so I don't want to let that point cool.
We've offered speed signs and speed bumps. And
So hold on a second. So I would like to see if there's something that can be done that's commercially reasonable, but that addresses the people that live there, and like you said, you've got another development there too, so it kind of behooves you in that sense. So, Mark, do you mind taking that back to see if there's anything else that could be
we got the letter
proposed?
from them after our meeting. We can,
Effectiveness too, right?
Yeah, we can.
Someone else has implemented it. And,
we can share that back. I had conversations with David. He's the traffic expert in the corner if you have questions directly for him. But he and I have had conversations, back and forth on that, and then they provided their, the most recent memo. I can bring that back to transportation. However, the transportation.
I don't know that it has to go back to the committee, but if there's something that.
Engineering can.
Engineering, if engineering can look at that together.
Okay.
And then, again, on that point with contribution, Sanders Farm, so I understand it's not part of this application, but it made a lot of sense to me, so thank you for scrolling there. Getting out onto 441 and onto Willow Pond, what do you guys think about making that a right turn only?
A right in and right out, you mean, at this location?
Right in, right out.
Yes.
So people coming down 441 traveling east could only make a right in?
Correct.
And people, or you can only make a right out? You would want, I think folks who live in this neighborhood might want to have the potential ability to make the left in.
But they said that they couldn't anyway, because 440, and I see that, right? I think somebody had suggested that, and I thought a lot about it, drove it, and I was like, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. Like, I don't know, what do you?
So that's a DOT thing, right?
That just needs to be a conversation with the state DOT,
Right.
because that would officially fall under their intersection.
Yeah.
Since 441 is their road. Not saying it can't happen, but that's a conversation I can have with the state. But that's something that,
Residents who are going to work third shift at 2 a.m., they still want to be able to make that left turn. That's the only thing I could see from a resident's perspective. I think the majority of them would appreciate the safety,
I mean, how many
honestly.
people, though, work at 2 a.m. versus like the others?
but I think the
Right,
people that
traffic, yeah.
have issues, concerns about it, you've got a traffic light just down the street.
You
So
do
if-
at Willow Pond,
So if
right?
people are that concerned about pulling in or out, I would go to the traffic light and wait to make my left out or make my left in at the traffic light. If this is a convenience and there's not a lot of traffic and you're at 2 a.m., you come in and out this entrance. If
Okay.
you have a safety concern, you
Go the other way. So with that, let's move to that intersection, because I did look at the transportation study. And again, when I talk about the health and safety of our residents, that intersection right there, from what was provided in the traffic study, is
Linda, just to be
8 times
clear,
higher.
which intersection are you referring to?
Willow Pond, the light.
Willow Pine Way
The
and
light.
440.
So
The light.
over
Oh, the
that way,
light.
Carrie.
So that's considered an intersection, right?
Thank
Because there's a light there. So right now, the last statistics that were in the traffic study said that current crash rate is 8 times higher than New York State Department of Transportation average. And this was based on a very low ADT. So the ADT listed that at 13,600, and that rate was still that high. And that just came out of the transportation study that was shared. So that was the other thing the residents talked about, was that intersection is going to be busy, there are crashes there, there's injuries, and that was all in our traffic study.
The one thing I would,
David,
Oh,
can you
sorry.
remind me, is that a dedicated left turn arrow at that light, or is that?
yes.
It's a turn pocket, but I don't know if it's a
No, it's
dedicated.
it has a light cycle. In some cases, the left turn lane is turned on, and you have a dedicated arrow at the beginning of the cycle. Other times.
It's the flashing yellow.
It's not a flash, it's just.
I'm sorry, just drop down the street view.
Oh, I sure can. Here, do you want to go? I'm just
Back a
gonna
little bit,
up
just to kind of line up to.
So
Where?
there's a turn signal available. It doesn't always activate. I don't know how that's figured out, but there are times where you have the green arrow to turn at the beginning of the cycle.
So you've got the left turn phase there.
Yes.
Yep, that's helpful. I just want to ask the question about the traffic study.
Sure.
Are you referring to the study that I put together, or the study?
No, I'm referring to a study that you just.
The
just
townwide.
uploaded, The townwide study,
Okay.
from
There's a
20 to
townwide traffic
22.
study.
Yep, okay. Yes, in our traffic study, I did look at crashes at each of the study intersections. This one definitely had a higher frequency of crashes. According to my analysis, I get crash data from New York State.
That's what this one had as well, yep.
Department of Transportation for the last 5 years. There were 31 total crashes there over the last 5 years. But I do want to point out that when we're looking at the safety of a road system, the priority these days amongst locals, the state, and the federal hierarchy is reducing and/or eliminating severe injuries and fatalities. And so, we certainly are cognizant that fender benders are going to be out there. They're not called accidents, they're crashes for that very reason that, they are preventable. And some of the severe injuries and deaths are definitely preventable. So when you look at the injury-related concerns there were a couple that our study did identify relative to the lighting, as Mark mentioned, a lighting study and/or a lighting assessment of the neighborhood in that segment there. We did indicate that that could be something that the state takes a look at, especially lighting the crosswalks. One of the incidents that we did see was an incident related to a dark condition with a pedestrian in the crosswalk. Yeah, and this intersection is certainly heavily traveled. Given that it's signalized, it's going to pull traffic from Sanders Farm or any other intersection that might be using it. We did find that, during the morning peak hour, people were a little bit more apt to being able to turn left out of Sanders Farm compared to the PM when we've got more, heavier traffic volumes as typical during the evening peak hours. Especially at that time, you also have a heavy eastbound traffic volume, so you're getting
People returning
more
home.
from the other direction. So that combined with what we saw here, people are less inclined to use Sanders Farm during the PM peaks. But as was mentioned, you get some of those off peaks, those off peak hours, especially after the evening hours. It's definitely an intersection. Sanders Farm is definitely an intersection that people would want to use as another means of egress.
So can I ask then, because I'm still trying to figure out, Kevin, Bob, how you guys feel about the write-in, write-out only, or Mark, I don't know the feasibility of introducing a light there. And it may also further slow traffic on 441. And if that's something that Mark IV would consider contributing towards the cost as well.
We will pay for any light there that the New York State DOT approves.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that. I'm sorry.
The DOT will never let us.
They won't approve that.
I mean, that's, again, the state has jurisdiction over that. To Linda's point, based on our traffic study, that's something with a high crash rate, that's something we can go to the state, and that's why we did our townwide traffic study.
Can we ask? Can we make the ask?
Oh, yeah.
Because I would feel better, like, I understand, Linda, where you're coming from.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just trying to think of solutions. What can we do to address it?
I'll have the conversation and be able to come back to the board, with.
Right, that's a really good point. Let me jump in real quick. Because this traffic study pointed out each time where there was an accident close to the intersection, but because it wasn't at the intersection, it said this was not counted. So anything that happened on Sanders Farm, we don't have any details. So if there were accidents at Sanders Farm, we don't know.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you have that data for 5 years from Sanders Farm and 441 as a location, or how is that?
So when you get accident or crash data, I did my own oopsie. When you get crash data at an intersection, you look at a 1/10 of a mile in all directions from that or to that. So, unless you're looking at segment specific, if there's something midway between Sanders Farm and Willow Pond here.
Plus or minus 500 feet.
Yeah.
Right, so what is that? What are we talking about?
Oh, yes, yeah, let me.
I'm just trying to determine, was that included or not included?
So I know in our study, we looked at crashes at Sanders Farm.
Okay.
441. Saw over a 5-year period, there was 5 crashes there.
At Sanders Farm?
At Sanders Farm, yep.
And I can tell you the opposite from that is Brentwood, which has its fair share of accidents as well, coming out on the 441, right
Or
kitty
441,
corner
I can't
from
do it.
Sanders Farm. I don't know if
There
that
is
data
an
is,
access point, though, on 250.
through New Wickham, you can wind around to 250,
Right.
yeah.
So I think we can advocate to DOT, and I don't know if anyone had a chance to look, but I'll just share publicly that the Sheriff's Department did enforcement on 441 and Empire, and through that, talking to Captain Kevin, who's a Zone A leader, we are sending or sent a letter to the DOT recommending a change on Empire. We can certainly do that, and I like that approach because the Sheriff's Department obviously is getting feedback on where the action is, so to speak. And there was a lot of tickets issued on 441 Empire. Empire's sort of one of the big topics, obviously, but so is 441. But through that, we can do the same thing and advocate for those changes, whether it happens or not. But
So I think that's a great. I think that's a great idea, and I did see the Empire letter. So I'm just trying to come with takeaways so that we know what's coming back in January. Outreach to DOT. consideration of a potential light if approved, and if approved, mark 4 to fully fund?
No.
That's what
Well,
you said. If DOT approved, mark 4 would pay for the light.
I think the DOT would be, if they're going to approve it, they'll be happy to pay for it. It's not going to
Okay.
come out of the town's budget.
All right, so to be debated
Well,
later,
yeah,
but
we can negotiate that.
potential right in, right out, and maybe that's something better discussed anyway with engineering and
Well,
market traffic.
that would be a DOT thing, too.
Well, it's going to be a combination. It would be a combination DOT and neighborhood, because you're essentially changing the context and the nature of that neighborhood and the access to it. So that would definitely be something that you'd want to make sure you're
But something that you guys are going to work on,
Yes.
right?
Right.
And bring back. I understand, yeah, it's not just
And we
you
would
guys only.
also include Bob Moore and DPW in that conversation as well, since it
Yes.
would be affecting a
Yes.
town road.
And if there's anything else on Willow Pond, any additional, I understand Transportation Committee has already looked at it, but if there's any other feasible, commercially reasonable things that we can add there for traffic safety, I'm just trying to think, was there any?
And I know we did hear from some residents about Sanders Farm, but I'd like to hear from more residents in that area, what their thoughts are on the proposed idea, if it was to come to fruition. You know, we're hearing from some, but it might be good to make sure everyone knows we're actually thinking about or looking at it, so they might want to speak up as well.
And this could be not a focus, but this can be, again, a Transportation Committee task to, right, Mark? Leaning on you a little bit to reach out to residents and get
I
feedback.
mean, if we get to that point.
Yeah.
I mean, in the initial, between now and January, I'll have the conversations with the state. I'll reach out to them and then,
Okay.
have feedback for the board.
One of our residents, actually several of them, whether it was through email or at our hearings, talked about the infrastructure focus on Penfield, whether it's emergency services, road. I don't think roads would be affected by this per se. But then the schools, and one of the residents said, this is marketed toward double income, no kids. And she asked if there's a way to ensure that. Now, I know state law will not allow.
Right, fair housing, federal fair housing has.
Or fair housing. But it does, with that, it does raise the thought of, that puts more infrastructure strain. Again, more children, more emergency services in that compact area. Has that been looked at? Are we clear on all of that?
Yeah,
from an infrastructure?
typically the number of potential units wouldn't increase the number of residential units doesn't rise to the level of potentially creating that much of an impact on the provision of services, meaning emergency services.
All of it, right.
I do know that the fire marshal has, and I don't know if
We
they.
have ladders to get up.
Yeah, so fire marshal has been communicating with the fire department, fire service, to review applications or proposals. I can verify that this was reviewed with the Penfield Fire District.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that this use compared to the already approved use would be night and day. The
Yes.
previous approval would certainly have an impact on
Would have or
emergency.
Yes,
Would.
have. Well,
Greater than
for
what this plan
especially
would
for
be.
the-
ambulance.
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
fair.
I know it's crass to talk about, too, but we're going to add $15 or $20 million to your tax base, so those services are going to be paid for and then some. With generally apartments, market rate apartments pay more into the system than they take out, than they draw. The fire district is going to tax.
Tax-base positive. So
Tax
for every
positive.
dollar a multifamily residential pays in taxes, they demand less than $1 worth of
Oh,
services.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
That sort of that.
Okay.
Versus single-family
what
residential
you're
is usually tax negative.
Yeah.
Mark, I just want to, just to button up, at least the speeds on Willow Pond. I know that was a significant issue, and I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't overlooked in the traffic study. We did make sure we looked at speeds along Willow Pond in that segment there in front of not only the project site, but along the S's there. And we did find that based on a total of 600 and almost 700 vehicles in the eastbound direction and 400 cars in the westbound direction, the 85th percentile, so it's basically the most people, what's the majority of people driving, how are they driving it, are driving it at 27 miles per hour or less.
So 85% of travelers, yeah.
That's a traffic standard, is the 85th percentile is what you look at. So the vast majority of the people are doing
Basically,
right around the speed limit or
above,
less.
Yeah, 2 above the speed.
So those feedback carts, we've used those in the past. They're both educational for the person driving the car. They're also educational for the people sitting in their front lawn thinking the person's doing 50 going by, and then you see it come up as,
And I'll say,
see it come up as 27, so, or what, you know, if
When you
that's
put
85th
the
percentile, so.
Things down, right?
Right.
Well, no, the actual cart, the sign that flashes back and says you're doing this speed.
Okay, I was thinking when you put the,
We do for the counters, that's how we collect the data.
Right.
But the feedback they've offered to provide those, that's
is that
not only,
track of?
some of them track, some of them are just a feedback,
yeah,
but
you
it's.
could
Immediate
do a
notice,
couple.
right?
Right, what I'm saying, though, does that device have? Is that where you got your
So
numbers?
no, this, in fact, the devices that Mark was mentioning are, you know, they're visible.
Right.
You can turn them into stealth mode, so you can still collect the speed
Right,
data
right.
if you want, but it won't show your feedback, or you can have it on feedback, so you get that.
But it's collecting all
but
that
it's-
data.
It can be collecting. The units that we used are very inconspicuous. They're, you know, maybe the size, they're a little larger, but, you know, the length of this microphone here,
Right.
they're white. You just attach them to a signpost
Right.
or so, and they don't give any indication to anybody passing by that they're collecting.
You're not
So
altering.
you don't know that the
There
data is
was
being
no
collected as you're
altering
driving
their
by?
speed.
Well, no, I
Alter it.
get all that, I get all that. Is that how? Because those devices collect those data. So that when you can say, we've had 50 cars doing this or 100 cars doing that, it's because it's collecting those data.
You certainly can, yeah.
But I mean, how did you get your report? Yeah.
So we got our data, yeah, like I said, in a device that's about the length of this microphone here.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Count Cam. We use it for either traffic collections to actually set up at the intersections, which we did here. So we use the same device to not only record video at the intersections to do our traffic counts from, but then we also can set it up to record basically a screen line count or capture cars
Okay.
going by it, and it captures the number of vehicles as well as the speed of that vehicle traveling past it.
Okay. And what was your, what were the parameters of
We kept
collecting
it out.
that data?
We kept it out for a couple days, so
Okay.
then
Summer,
throughout the night,
winter?
yeah, it was September.
Okay.
Is this it? Can you see the?
Yeah, basically, yeah, that's the new model.
Okay.
Little heavier duty.
Count cam.
But
So-
yeah, that's what we're using.
We have an older,
Version?
the actual, not that, we actually put the strips on the road and you
Right,
drive
that's what I
over
was
them.
thinking of when we were first
Yep,
talking
the
about
tube
it.
Right.
counters. We've got tube counter data as well, for this area.
Well, and also to Mark's point, there are times where if you're a pedestrian and you're walking in a street and a car goes by you, it feels like they're going very fast, but if you saw the speed, they're on their speedometer or could see it on the, it could just be 25 miles an hour.
But I do not, I don't doubt people having issues with some vehicles speeding.
Yeah.
I live on a road that is certainly a through street, and there are those that will speed, and
Right.
they stick out in my mind and my neighbor's mind.
Right.
So that's definitely not, I'm not discounting that at all. And
Yeah.
it's unfortunately, it's usually those that are traveling above that 85%, it's those 15% that are sort
Right.
of creating a very
Unsafe feeling.
safe feeling, correct.
Unfortunately, most of those people probably live in the
neighborhood.
Live in the neighborhood that are
Every neighborhood.
driving those speeds. so.
Yes. Well, yeah, for sure.
So I know we talked about, we're trying to, address all of the resident concerns as well as the public hearing stuff. But our town attorney had, in also reviewing it, and then, of course, the elements in which where we do have jurisdiction, right, and how we have to make a decision that complies with the criteria, right? As part of that review, he had recommended two things, which I'd like to support, and I think you guys all got that email as well. So the two things were, we know something is going to be built at Willow Pond, but there are several other housing areas potentially that could be developed or proposals that we may anticipate coming in the next 3 to 5 years. And should the town consider hiring a consultant for density population review? And whether or not, if every proposal was approved, whether or not Penfield truly needs the additional 1,300 units, and what that would impact, Linda, on
Right.
schools, businesses, et cetera, everything, infrastructure. I'm highly in support of that. I don't know.
Yes.
Cool, thanks, Kevin. Bob, Linda, Jeff?
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
I think there's other things the town could do internally, but yeah.
So I know it's not on.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
unrelated to this application.
It's unrelated, and
I mean,
I understand. It's going, this is something at Willow Pond is going to proceed before we issue that. But I would like just to understand, right, as we consider this, something here is going to pass, but what about all these other ones? So if the 88 units here go, well, do we necessarily need the other, 1,000? Right, exactly. So Carrie, if you can work on that either at a future work session, or Mark, please prepare the bid documents as well as the resolution for the board to consider. And the second thing was, appreciate your traffic study, appreciate all the other traffic studies, but like Jeff mentioned, Empire 441, 250, traffic concerns everywhere. Can the town please consider a townwide, an independent townwide traffic study that would look at this from a more global perspective, and have it be updated, because the one that we have is 2022, which there are developments being, that were added between 2022 and 2024, and then proposed in the next, 18 months. Can we please consider an independent study so that the planning board, town board can be more educated in real time?
Is that something for the Transportation Committee to take on, or with the boards?
We do have the intersection study. We'll be talking about that later tonight. We can look at that looks at specific intersections and crash data and individual analysis. That would be something we would outsource, to look at a global amount of cars per road and everything else. So, that's something we can.
And town's always looking for donations there as well.
To pay for your global traffic study?
To some extent, there'll be an opportunity to explore some of that, because the town is going to be engaging the services for an active transportation plan.
We do have that, and I remember that was part of the transportation budget for 2025 as well. And so I'm not trying to duplicate. I just want to see how, again, from a global.
During the active transportation planning process, one of the things that they analyze is sort of the safety, like how busy are the main roads that service the town, and so that by proxy, you're going to have a little bit of that information just through the active transportation process.
Linda said yes, Jeff said yes, Bob, Kevin?
Agree?
Yes.
Okay.
Cool. So can you bring that to, same thing, research, RFP, resolution to be prepared. I feel like this is like the last agenda item, and we're not even like halfway through, so maybe it's a good stopping point. Did want to also talk about the sidewalks and just pedestrian safety, but maybe, Mark, you can take that along with the additional, any other suggestions. So the two takeaways for January are we want Pete, obviously, to help weigh in as well. Seeker needs to be completed and or discussed, right?
Well, we have that information available for you tonight. If you wanted to, we could discuss it in January.
Do you mind holding?
I don't mind holding.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
it's up to you. Are you okay?
No, it's up to you. You get to tell me.
Well, we're not able to make a decision tonight, so I'm not looking to delay, and we appreciate all of, at least.
Are we not? I'm willing to make a decision to move on. Is that true with everyone? Not to, just saying. I'm
not ready to move on, or
Okay.
not going to make a decision tonight.
No.
I think there's a lot of outstanding still. I do appreciate it. I know I'm going to be tough on this, but I am very concerned about those residents, so.
I just want to make sure we don't.
Can I find out what?
Answers and a lot of it, so.
What are the issues that are outstanding related to the special use permit?
Some of the transportation mitigation issues is.
Okay.
That's item number one.
Traffic enhancements?
The two takeaways for engineering, if I recall, was, right, Sanders Farm, potentially trying to hear from residents for the right in, right out.
Or light.
And then, yes, the second thing was to contact DOT, and in the same way that we did with Empire, they're contacting for the feasibility of a light to create an intersection at Sanders and Willow Pond for additional traffic, as an additional traffic control device. And then the second for engineering and your traffic consultant to work on was, again, reviewing Willow Pond to see if there was any other commercially reasonable anything to, in your words, not make it a runway. So those are the two takeaways for our team to bring back.
I'm with you. Okay, I
And
understand.
even maybe it's not a bunch of speed bumps, maybe it's one, right at the end, right? I mean,
I was the one who said it.
everything.
Oh, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that from a definition standpoint, because as you know, the semantics can matter when it comes to speed bumps and whatnot. So really, the three treatments that are typically, or can be typically used on a roadway to slow traffic in terms of being in the roadway, a physical element is the speed bumps, which
Right.
you would certainly see in a parking lot, and those you really are trying to stop traffic or slow traffic down to like 5 miles per hour. So there's a few studies that talk about what your target is for it. So you've got the speed bumps, they're very abrupt, you can feel them.
Right.
You don't want to hit those things any faster
Right.
than that. And you've got the speed humps, a little more gradual.
That's what's on Huntington Meadow.
So you've got those. Okay.
That's Huntington Meadow, the little,
It's a hump,
A hump.
So those-
Hump, not a
you don't
bump.
want to hit that fast.
but a speed bump is almost like hitting a parking curb.
Okay, I see
like
what you're
driving
talking about
over
with
a curb.
semantics.
So I just want to make, and then so you got the speed humps, and then.
A speed table.
There's speed tables that can be a little bit even more elongated. Let's talk about,
I know what you
tables or
mean.
so.
Yep.
That's in
It's used
Webster
to
Plaza.
Yep.
walk on.
They've got elevated walkways and
And then the last measure that we mentioned in the letter here is something called speed cushions. Those are basically, if you take your Huntington Meadow speed humps and you slice it in a couple different locations, what you end up doing is you have spaces for the larger vehicles, like an emergency vehicle, a fire truck, ambulance. They can drive over them without impeding the response times. I've worked with the Village of Pittsford, and the emergency responders there have viewed those more positively than the alternative of a speed hump or a speed bump, because it can allow for that. But for a smaller vehicle like yours and my cars, we're going to have to hit at least one set of wheels or one wheel. is gonna
We'll
have to
go
leave.
over it. Okay, I see what you're saying.
So let me clarify. We've already at least asked speed bumps, speed humps, right, or something else.
Yeah.
And that was said no by our transportation committee, and it would make it more challenging, difficult with our DPW for plowing.
Right.
The town is responsible to plow Willow Pond, so I think that was discussed, and
Yeah.
then as exploring any potential options, but there's I'm hearing from Mark, or at least a rational reason as to, it's been considered, it can't be done. So
For
I'm
sure.
not asking
Any
you
of
to
those.
revisit.
No. I just wanted to make sure that we're on
I'm
the
just
same
trying
page
to,
as
that's
well.
why we were talking
Yep.
about the speed feedback. Is there anything else that we
Yep.
can put to kind of alert, so that's what it is, and to see if it's commercially reasonable? But
Yeah, and then I
appreciate
think
at least.
they've also shared in their letter, you can put in like a pedestrian in-street, the sign, you've seen some places that's like in-street, that's more spring, summer, fall,
about
it's
a
not
little
winter.
And I was just,
That holds water, and
Yeah.
now you become an icing issue, so
No, I,
You and I can both sit there all day, Linda, you know?
all right.
Lawn chairs.
and my point, I guess, is that, I mean, a lot of what you say makes sense, especially the right, left-hand turn lane. I just view it as a separate issue than the special use permit. I view it as a
Yes,
transportation
yep.
thing.
Yep.
But we can probably get some kind of an answer from DOT in the
Yep.
near future, hopefully.
I do agree, and that's why I was trying to confirm earlier, it's not as part of the application.
Yeah.
And so I totally respect that and get that. But whether the 150 unit or the 88 unit goes in, it will still be a potential issue. And I know Mark wants this proposed plan approved, right?
Yeah.
And so if they are willing to contribute even like a small amount to make it a safer
I'm with you.
place, might as well take what we can get, right,
I'm
Jeff?
with you. I would say that.
So that's why.
My other point would be to say, and this is based on the feedback, the way I read it, it's an issue right now. I mean, so
Yeah.
some of these issues should be addressed, and they are being addressed somewhat in the Transportation Committee already, except the Sanders Farm right, left-hand turn. That's new to me, and I saw the email, but that's something we can address. But good point, yeah.
We're not paying for a Sanders Farm right in, right out, because I think the neighbors would murder us. I think they want to take lefts.
Yep, I understand, but let's hear from the feedback of the residents, and we can negotiate that again at some point. I think PCTV is going to at some point mute my mic, so Kevin, Bob, is there anything that you want Mark 4 to work on before the January work session? And I think you said you wanted to hear any additional concerns, so out of fairness to keep their application moving, is there anything that we want to make them bring back for January so we can make a decision?
Where do we stand on sidewalks, Mark? That one view there, I couldn't really tell with the...
We've requested, and they're installing sidewalks, continuing the piece across their frontage, and then bringing it back to the shoulder of the road. We've talked with the neighbors, and that would be something the town board would have to look at in the future. Those neighbors had asked about them. We had suggested them. Being short front yards, we'd have to take out a lot of landscaping. We're in parking areas, so I think we proposed it. They kind of backed off of that. I've not heard more about it, but obviously coming up in April, we'll be looking at 2026 sidewalks again and put that back out to the public. So if that's something that those neighbors desire, that's something obviously this board can consider. Knowing Sanders Farm was a busy road and entrance, we did add sidewalks in Sanders Farm
year or two.
3 or 4 years ago at this point, and then we've done some enhancements in Crown Oak, and then most recently we did sidewalks on the southern end of Willow Pond on the way in.
So they would be responsible for providing them in front of their property right now?
Correct. They're going to install them there and then return them to the shoulder since they don't continue on, so that'll be part of their...
But you guys did extend sidewalks from the original plan as well, right?
Yeah, they've extended down on that north side. We do have them for a portion of the southern side as well, for the
And
senior living facility on that side.
Sorry. Remind me, maximum is 2 apartments? 1 or 2 apartment? Within that, or 1 or 2 bedrooms, I'm sorry.
It's 1 or 2 bedrooms. There may be some 3-bedroom units, but we have, through our lease terms, we don't rent to,
more than
half a dozen people.
Okay. I just, again, is that parking, you've got it calculated for so many and probably guests
We
as
also
well.
regulate how many cars you get to have if you're one of our tenants.
But guests will come, and so I'm wondering.
With that taken into account.
It's
You
into
can park this many
consideration.
cars if you're our tenant.
Okay.
And that
That's all
leaves
been
guest
taken into
spaces. Yeah,
consideration.
that's all
Okay.
been calculated based
I
on.
thought it was, I
experience.
just wanted to confirm.
Yeah.
So we'll try to get those answers as quickly as we can.
Be back for the January?
Nothing else for Mark 4?
I don't have anything.
I don't have anything else.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. This was, I think, a
Thanks for your
productive
patience.
conversation. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good night,
He'll
drive
give you a
safe.
tutor. He'll give you lessons.
No. That's Berkeley failed, so.
I would have dropped it.
Don't need to go there again. Oh, okay.
1 or 2 apartments.
Take care, everybody. Drive safe.
It is.
All right.
I'm sorry, can we, I'm sorry, does the board mind if we take one item out of order, please, for the firearm discharge map? Because I understand, there's a resident here that I know feels very passionate about. Do you guys mind if we take it out of order so that she,
Sure.
Be fine.
Yeah.
are you guys, okay? Jeff, I'm sorry. is
Yeah,
that
no,
okay?
no.
All right.
Absolutely.
Just so you can drive home safer. Yep, hello. Sir, are you here for a particular item? Because we'll be here very late. Which item are you here for?
I'm not in any hurry, and I'm here to hear the barn and house updates.
Okay. Do you mind if we take those two out of order so that our residents can leave?
Sure.
Cool.
I'm not in any hurry.
Oh, okay.
I am, but go ahead. It's okay.
He always is, so don't worry about that.
It's past my bedtime now. All right, so we'll move up the firearm discharge map. Mark, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, so I received a request to add it to the agenda, so I sent out to the board kind of the last iteration that we had. After the last discussion, we did have some public audience. We had some farmers that shared their concern. Basically, we had drawn the line straight north of kind of the Rocco Pines development. So they had requested theirs to be removed from that, so there's a little gap change, as Carrie's pulling that up, I think between the red and the orange. That's the only notable change in that area in that map. So originally, so if you're looking at the map, so as we go through the different areas, starting at the bottom, the blue and the green are existing established neighborhoods. We just encompass those as, established developments. The yellow area is the area of the new mixed-use zoning district, so it shows the meets and bounds of the zoning district. The orange area going north is the Rocco Pines neighborhood, so that's being developed currently. And then we had just drawn the line straight north. Well, that encompassed, and we had some residents here. Ben Berry was here, the Cleary property. They shared concerns about encompassing their property within that boundary, so we took that off. The red area to the top is Cranberry Cove, and Abington, Barclay is what we had incorporated into that. So just wanted to brief the board as kind of where it is from, I think we were last talking about this in April. Subsequent to that, I've had conversations with neighbors that have other areas of concerns they'd like added to the map. I think they've reached out to the board. We've also gotten letters from Dave Woodward, farmer. Obviously, he has concerns about not limiting areas. So I think the board has comments and feedback on both, but that's, the pink area is what's in it now.
So the pink is the existing map?
Pink is the existing map. The color-coded is the areas we had kind of proposed based on previous supervisors' requests. So they said, hey, can you update the map? So that's where it kind of started from initially. We came in, originally it was called the hunting map. This really has nothing to do with hunting. This is the firearm discharge map. So the board last voted to change it to be the firearm discharge map. There are still laws.
I was going to say, it's important to point out that even in the areas that are not currently shaded pink, to say no firearm discharge, by state law, you're not allowed to fire a gun or a firearm in those areas now, because you wouldn't be able to be in compliance with the state law that governs distance from structures and from dwellings or schools.
The DEC regulates the underlying law. You have to be 500 feet from a structure. You need to be operating, in codes and laws
I
regulations.
understand. Pink is what we have now, and
Correct.
pink also aligns with the state law.
The state law covers the entire
everything.
state of New York,
Yeah.
so it doesn't matter.
Yes.
No. Well, I'm trying to get to what you just said, is that the DEC also has. So I'm trying to understand, where is our ability to draw lines? Do we have an ability?
We can adjust the firearm discharge. You can hunt in the pink area. You can use a bow. You can use others. So that's why we took off the hunting, because you can hunt in the pink area as long as you're meeting the distance requirements and regulation and everything else.
You couldn't fire a firearm. You couldn't discharge a firearm, though, in the pink area.
The only place it's different, because I think I just asked this question because I was curious. I hear shots on Iroquois Bay. I think it's different on the water.
It is.
Yep.
It's also different on, there's a couple.
We have two gun clubs in town that are pre-existing, and they have exceptions for those as well.
But the DEC laws cover the pink area and everything to the east.
DEC covers hunting.
No discharge of firearm.
Discharge of firearm. So let's look at those two separately. Because if you're hunting in any pink area, and as long as you have that distance, if you're hunting, you really can't be hunting anytime, because there's only seasons for hunting, correct?
Yep.
So the rest of it, let's say 60% of the year, we're talking about firearm discharge, because there's such a small window, really.
Well,
yeah.
Maybe I missed something, but I mean, there's people certainly east of 250 that will shoot at practice. They'll shoot a gun without hunting, I guess I want to say.
Oh, yeah, like you can,
target
like target
practice.
practice.
Not hunting, though.
But not hunting.
I'm just want to make sure we get that clear. So firearm discharge right now, we say, no, you cannot do it, whether you're 500 feet or 10,000 feet in the pink area. Is that a true statement?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Yellow and red and the pretty green
And the blue.
in the orange.
are what we way back when was the proposal to say, these now are more dense areas of population. We should consider including those in our, no, you cannot disarm or
Discharge, yeah.
discharge
Doing
a
the same
firearm.
thing.
Thank you.
Correct.
Correct, okay.
And what I was saying is that on most of the parcels, except for the areas in yellow that would meet the distance requirements, the blue, the green, and the red, and the orange, you likely couldn't discharge a gun now because you'd be violating state law.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? That's what I was.
Because you are too
You're not
close.
alone.
You're too close to
You're not
things.
More than 500 feet from the structure in any.
Right.
And that's beneficial, because if somebody looks at this and they rely on that, then they would see that those areas are just not,
You can't.
in some ways, having it the way it currently is a little misleading for someone.
If people don't know the law about what the distance requirements are.
Right.
Yes, I mean, the fact that you can see a neighbor from you I would hope would deter somebody from deciding they're going to try to fire a gun. Like, if you can see.
Would a portion of the yellow, because you said the red, the orange, and those colors, you can't,
You wouldn't be able to. Right now, the structure and distances, you might be able to legally, if it wasn't, but as it gets developed, you won't be able to.
The yellow, we know
The
the
yellow's
arbors
gonna-
are going up.
The yellow.
Yes,
Gonna-
yeah,
The big-
that's shifting.
The big portion of the yellow that's in the middle is the golf course, so that's Penfield Golf Course. A portion of that is the town.
The back end, yep.
That's the big piece on the south side. The north side is our property, so it's the town hall campus, in that area, so.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And Mark, can you remind me, I think this is very unusual to have a non-discharged map like townwide. I know there is in the city, which I don't
We're
think helps,
unique.
but-
I've called the other communities, and I think Pittsford has one, but nobody else in Monroe County has one. They basically just rely on the underlying DEC state law about discharge and proper distance and everything else, so we're a bit unique in that sense.
Yeah, the only communities that have no discharge rule is in highly developed, like, for example, the town of Arundequite has a no discharge anywhere in the town.
Like Brighton maybe.
Brighton, maybe, like, some might have that, the city of Rochester has one.
But they don't have an individual map.
But they
They're
have
just-
they also have nowhere that you really could legally,
do it anyway.
in reality, or safely, potentially.
Right.
Yeah.
The one thing that I liked was the diagram that was made of the 500 feet and the
Oh, yeah,
1,000 feet.
I have that.
That was something that Matt had prepared just to kind of help with, and that's something that could be adopted as well as an education.
I would like to see that if we adopt anything new, that is incorporated to define, how it is across the entire town, because I found that very useful, and I think it's a good reminder. Because, a lot of this, it comes down to an issue of enforcement. And I think that if the town is showing this and saying, remember, everyone, this is what the law is, that, that's one of the first steps that I think is most important.
That's a great point, and, the more, and I love the town because of its diversity, but you go east to 250, maybe the farther you go east, some of the rules probably, are not followed. For instance, if you're in a house that, it includes your own house in terms of a dwelling, so kind of a reminder would be good. I think of East 250, where I can see where people, that can be vague, especially if you're not worried because you don't have any neighbors nearby. The zoning's different, it's not as dense. Anyway.
And I think the residents who have come to us have been talking about hearing the guns going off in the morning, taking their children to bus stops, walking in the evening, kids coming home from school. And I get that maybe we have farmers who are protecting their crops. I'm not too sure about that in the winter. But one thing I was thinking of, is there a compromise or the start of a compromise for the town to put in time of day restrictions for firearm discharge in these other areas? Like, listen, you can't be shooting, 6 to 8 a.m. or 6 to 9 a.m.
Coon hunting happens at night. I can only share this because my ex-husband used to do it. I lived out in Hamlin. Coon hunting is done at night after you have to be doing it in the dark, and there's hours of the window.
What kind of hunting?
Raccoon hunting.
Oh, okay.
I had coon hounds once upon a time.
Gotcha.
So you do that at night.
Right.
Because that's when they're out and they're nocturnal. So if you have major damage from raccoons on your property, you might be doing that to try to lessen the population.
Like middle of the night type of thing? Okay.
I can share you.
Well, and mine was saying, that's okay, but let's not do it between 4 and 7 p.m., and let's not do it.
Well, I think that's
6 and-
most deer hunting happens at dusk and
Deer
dawn.
hunting is different. I would say, the hunting, those seasons,
Right.
that's where DEC, we can't probably regulate DEC, right? I mean, you can't.
Yeah, the hunting
Right.
DEC has purview over.
Exactly.
Those regulations.
Yeah, just like I'm just
Yeah.
trying to think, because I can see both sides of it. I really can. I can see the farmers are selling land or leasing land for hunters during hunting season. They're trying to protect their crops. But I know I wouldn't want to be walking to the bus stop or standing at the bus stop with my child and hearing gunshots constantly, or walking my dog in the evening. So nobody's going to be happy, so I look for compromise of some type.
Monroe County Sheriff might be able to provide feedback in terms of enforceability, in terms of what the onus is for enforcing it, because that's the other, so if
How do
somebody.
you catch somebody doing that?
What? How do you, that's what I'm
But
saying,
I'm
right? So
saying if we're putting arbitrary hours in,
Well,
if
I
a
would
complaint
hope
comes
that
in-
people would try to respect things. It's kind of like a stop sign. People are always going to disobey a stop sign. That doesn't mean we don't put them in or ask people to stop. So it's
Right.
trying to come up with something that we could
I think your
get
point of,
people to respect.
let's talk to the people that have to enforce it and see if there isn't anything feasible. We're not the ones that are going to.
Yeah, fair.
Between the DEC and the Monroe County Sheriffs, they're the ones who have to enforce it, and they say that's untenable, then
Yeah, we can certainly reach out to the Monroe County sheriffs in the A zone.
Sure.
We have connection, we also know the DEC enforcement officers. We could get some feedback from them, if that's helpful.
Just, again, trying
The
to find
ideas.
things. And maybe I went too far. Sorry, go ahead, Kevin. I was going to say, maybe we should decide one thing and then, go ahead, Kevin.
Well, because we brought this up again, and it's been offline for a little while, I just wanted to provide a little bit of the context for anyone who might be watching, who might,
good idea.
So, I really would like the map to reflect the areas in town where it's obvious that you cannot do the discharging of the
adding
firearms. And then, to state clearly the 50 and 1,000-foot restrictions on firearms discharge in relation to dwelling, because that's one thing that I think isn't as well known, that depending on the caliber, the distance is different. So, I think taking a common sense approach is an appropriate way to go. In some ways, there's almost like two Penfields. There's the suburban, dense Penfield, and then there's the more rural Penfield. I grew up in a rural area. I understand, gun culture, farm culture, all that. I don't want to do anything that's arbitrary, where we would just say, all right, well, we're going to ban discharge anywhere west of a certain road, because there could be someone who's had a farm there for the last 100 years, and we'd suddenly be saying that you can't teach your kid to shoot. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, that's a concern. But I think, again, regardless of what we do with the map, it's kind of like the speeding thing, where we need to do some sort of initiative to have better enforcement of what's going on, to maybe work with DEC, maybe work with the sheriff's office, because that's the crux of the situation. And one of the biggest concerns that was brought up is that somebody, was shooting. They were drinking, and they were shooting off their porch, and their house is 200 feet from mine. I called the DEC. They said they weren't hunting. There's nothing I can do. I called local law enforcement. They said there was nothing they could do. So people are frustrated because they don't have any recourse whatsoever. And so I think that regardless of what we do with this, we also need to look at the larger picture, that we have townspeople who really want the town to address the fact that other authorities are not enforcing, and we don't have the ability to enforce. So wanted to put that out there.
Oh.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'll just say that, and I'm very familiar with what the city's going through, and law enforcement is generally overwhelmed, and it's hard to address everything, and it's just so difficult. Speeding's just a great example. People are just not following the current laws, so adding more laws, I don't think necessarily helps them to follow. I mean, the bad people are going to do whatever they want, regardless of what added laws. So I just want to say that. In my opinion, regarding the map, my concern, I just soon do away with the map because the current laws kind of cover it. My worry about adding to it someday, too, I don't want it to keep going east is one concern I have, and I feel strongly about keeping kind of East Penfield the way it is, so to speak, and the freedoms it has in the hunting and shooting. So just my thought in general.
Does anyone recall for the hunting? I couldn't find my notes fast enough. Was it those who had expressed like the hunting concerns, especially that abut to the property? Was it mostly in the yellow that was the concern?
I don't know if there was an
I don't think it was
identified
red. I don't
location.
think
It was, you're right,
Yellow?
it was yellow, because somewhere in there is, what is on the west side of, what street is it? I can't say, west side of the yellow. What's
That's Route 250 right there where Carrie's heading.
Yeah, Jackson's the
That's
next one.
Jackson over there.
Jackson. As you go up Jackson, there is a lot of open land.
Yeah.
There's parcels, but they're open parcels, and I believe those were the individuals
Yeah, up-
that had a lot of open land in
Yeah,
there.
north of
And
Plank
then
Road
Right.
on the east side.
North of Plank, and
Berry
those
or-
are the ones that were orange. We took those off. So it was
Bus depots going in there.
They're,
was the-
they're actively farming, I think, those
the
parcels.
Berry,
still.
the Berry property, the
Yeah.
Cleary property, the few that get up
Yeah.
and spoke.
How would that buffer affect their parcel lines? Like, it shows that it's still the DEC, so in other words, if it's, I'm not familiar with how close those homes are to their parcels, but that's still going to prevail, right? The DEC distance, doesn't matter if we.
Yep. I mean, I think there's an
Correct.
exception if it's your home, so it's occupied structure, but you can, if it's your house, you can shoot within 500 feet of your own home, but any other occupied structure,
You can't
you have
be-
to have distance from
How
that.
about roadways? Is there a piece to that?
And I'm not expert, I know you can't shoot over a roadway, there's,
Right.
there are, again, that covers all of New York State,
Yeah.
whether the map or not.
Yeah,
that's
there's
the
a
underlying-
proximity to a roadway, just like a dwelling, if
Yep.
that's what the question was, sorry.
And also, there's distance requirements from school properties as well.
Right.
Yeah, so.
And I believe parks as well.
I think you're correct.
Trails,
Yeah.
right, if you've got a trail going through, does that include?
I would think that would include public land.
We can,
and-
we can pull the,
So let me ask, I mean, it gets really hard when the line is like squiggly
I
like
know.
this for notice purposes. And so I think like the red, it's fair to say that it is so densely populated and there is no one individual landowner that would be like, right, is that?
impacted.
And so I'm concerned about the orange and yellow because I just can't remember where the concerns were.
The orange, at least the few that get up and spoke, were north of Plank, and those are white now. So those
Okay.
parcels up in there are the ones
Okay.
that I took note of, and we took those off.
Okay.
The yellow, we could cut it at 250 right now to keep a clean edge if you wanted, to not be as jagged. I know there are some people that have bigger parcels on the east side of 250. We could,
Yeah.
So let me ask, so in order to make changes, again, does this have to go to a public hearing because of notice purposes?
This doesn't require a public hearing, to my knowledge. It's a map that the town board has created, and it's not subject to a public hearing by any code that I'm aware of.
Okay, so,
That's a
so in the spirit of,
question.
I'm sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
you know what?
I thought we did,
I know
we had
we-
a public
we-
hearing
I
on
think
this
that's
last
how
time.
we had a
That's why I'm
public hearing
asking.
initially.
I don't know if it needs a public hearing, or if it was a public, you can have a public hearing on
Yeah, we
anything
might have
you'd
just
like.
decided to do it.
You might
based
just have
on-
decided to do it. It might not be required, but public information meeting or a public hearing at your will or discretion as a board.
The only thing we could do is get some feedback from the sheriff's department on this topic and also enforcement.
Are you thinking about a public hearing notification of some sort, or setting another meeting to discuss? Or just a notification to the impacted properties?
I don't know.
I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea. My guess is we get feedback on both sides, so, I mean, I think, well, I don't know
And
if we...
will, the public hearing is just on what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, just the one.
No, nothing further?
3, 4, 5.
That's up to you.
We take it further?
I mean,
If we're going to have a public hearing?
Well, I guess that's up for consideration, right?
I would think that probably the public hearing would be to, for proposed changes, but if anybody wanted to say they wanted to propose their own changes, that would be inherent in it, so in some way, I would think, right?
Okay, so
Yeah.
January 8th is but it's our org meeting too.
Yeah, we'd
We
be
were-
into February.
we'd be
is where
to
we're-
the
February. So I'd like to make a motion for a public hearing to be scheduled for February 5th at the legislative session with the proposed, right, Linda, like in the spirit of compromise, for the proposed changes being these highlighted areas.
Leave the yellow where it is that your suggestion?
Well, that's why I was struggling to remember, like, if it was
Mark, was
orange or
that-
yellow, where it was the.
Was yellow based on the mixed use?
So
That was
zoning?
kind of found,
Yeah.
the mixed-use zoning outline, but I also understand kind of the enforcement part of it, if you wanted to kind of follow 250, just to kind of make this road, this road, this road, if it's an easier enforcement for,
knowing where it's
Police
allowed or
and-
not allowed.
Yeah, it would be easier, but
And with oh, sorry, go ahead.
Are we going to inherently just limit it to this? I mean, if somebody came in and they said, obviously someone could say, I don't
take
want
it
my
further,
yellow,
yeah.
or somebody could say, I want it taken further. I mean, yeah, it's not going to be limited, it's just to
It's a public
propose
hearing.
changes for.
Right.
Yeah.
Public hearing, they can come and talk. I'm curious really to hear from orange and yellow, and especially for the larger parcels on the yellow. And Mark, I don't know if you can,
I think the couple people that have reached out regarding this issue live east of 250, so this would give the opportunity for them to be heard again.
Yep, yep.
That's one way to say it.
So you had made the motion, correct? I'll second that.
thank you.
Okay, vote, please.
Barry.
Aye.
Reed.
Aye.
Leenhouts.
Aye.
Ockenden.
aye.
Teglash.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move the barn up to the next item. Carrie?
I'm sorry, forgive me, we
Yeah.
were talking about.
Info items.
Yeah.
Okay, Clerk House, this is a quick update, just to remind the town board that the project is currently out to bid. 3 pre-bid walkthroughs were conducted. Our engineer and design firm received questions, and it's called RFI. And they've issued an addendum and responses to every question that was received in the timeline that was outlined in the bid.
Bye, Sarah, drive
And
safe.
Sue.
Sue, thank you.
He was just
I
saying
said
good
Sarah,
night.
I misspoke. Drive safe, Sue. Oh, I will. Sorry. Thanks, Carrie, or Candace. Yeah. Okay. I just need to be quiet.
You're welcome, Bob.
Yeah. Touche.
I'm kidding. Sorry, Supervisor. We're all getting a little punchy now. The bids are scheduled to be, there are 5 prime contracts outlined in the bid, and they're scheduled to be received and opened by the town clerk on this Friday at 11 a.m. And so at the next meeting in January, I hope to be bringing you the results of that bid opening. In addition to that, Mark and I have sought proposals for construction management services that would also be required for that project. And so we'll have all of that packaged up for you in a neat little bow between now and January work session meeting. So that's that update.
it's the Clerk House.
That was the Clerk House update. For the Clerk Road barn, we're going to do that one as well. For the Clerk Road barn,
That's the one I meant, but that's okay. Yeah, no, go
I'm
ahead.
so sorry.
fine.
For the Clerk Road barn, as the board may or may not be aware, at the last barn advisory committee meeting, some of the residents had met offline as a group to prepare some recommendations for the full committee's review. They sent that sort of summary of recommendations out to everyone on the committee, and included town board members are copied in on those communications, so you all have seen it. There's a sort of a review of potential recommendations and suggestions. At the Barn Advisory Committee meeting, the consensus that was reached by the residents was to recommend what we would call selective demolition with the intent of preserving the beams intact to the, if that's, presuming that's possible, given the age of the structure, but with the idea of having the beams structure, the superstructure, meaning the core timbers, to be preserved, numbered, and stored. That was a recommendation. In that description of like the possible recommendations, there was a suggestion or a question about whether or not town staff, and meaning DPW, could perform that work that is well beyond any of our capabilities from an equipment standpoint, from a staffing, and you have to have licensed crane operators. No one has that. We don't have cranes. We don't have anyone, even if we could rent a crane, we don't have anybody licensed to operate one. It's not a service, or the insurance for it. It's not a service that DPW would ever need to conduct anywhere else. So we would have to, and just to get and understand where the cost is, I presumed it was going to be more than $35,000 that would require a public bid. I did reach out to a local demolition contractor who does a lot of demolition projects. That's the only thing they do, just to get a sort of a order of magnitude cost and confirm that we needed to potentially go to bid if this is something the town board wanted to act on. For that selective, careful with a plan of numbering them, keeping them intact. You'll see in there, there's a sort of just an email describing that the cost for that would be somewhere on the order of estimating starting at $250,000, could exceed $300,000. It would depend on the specific of the scope. That didn't include storage. That would be
That was my question, yeah.
separate.
Storage. Okay.
And the demolition contractor mentioned the use of 40-foot containers potentially. There's a monthly, charge for those. I don't know if the beam lengths in the building exceed 40 feet. One individual beam potentially could be longer than that, so you'd need some other alternative potential warehouse storaging. We don't have a location to adequately store them because they've got to be sort of elevated in a very careful way so you don't take them down carefully and then you don't rot and or become subject to insect damage. So we can work on preparing bid documents if that's a direction the town board wants to move in. And so just wanted to bring that to your attention. No decision has to be made tonight. You can certainly, there's a lot of information to sort of mull over. I just wanted to make sure you had like the snapshot of where we are right now.
But that is the recommendation.
The committee wanted to move forward with selective demolition. And when I submitted sort of the request for, hey, can we have an understanding of price, what about, I said, option A was selective demolition with the numbering, keeping beams intact. Then option B was careful, a little bit less careful, but keeping beams, like cutting them into usable sections so they could potentially be repurposed for something else.
So you didn't need that one lot.
You're not keeping them.
Not the intent of putting it back together as the barn, but you could.
No, you could do it without, you could build other things.
Make a pavilion out of it, use the beam for the mantle in the new lodge. You could do other things with the beams, but not.
Or preserve it at the Clerk house, right?
Yeah, you could use it for other purposes, but not put it back together.
Not a big
Not to
barn.
reassemble
You could have a
it.
smaller structure, but just not a big barn.
Not to reassemble it in its current footprint.
No, I understood that.
Yeah. So that was a little bit of a lesser cost range that he provided. It was somewhere in the order of $75,000, maybe $100,000-ish. So
Go ahead.
I was
go
breathing.
ahead.
yes, no. And so, and then I didn't get any information if the town board wanted just to move ahead with a traditional, town staff does have the ability to take down structures, but with not potentially maybe not preserving. I can find out specifically what their capabilities could be and how much of the timber frame could be preserved realistically.
If you recall, right, like when this originally was brought, December
Last year.
2022, can't remember now, right? It was that town staff would
demolish
it, right? So, it's a turning point, right, for the board. It's a lot of money. either way. I think, we had paid for the chain link fence, and I know the tarp is not like a huge deal, but we did incur costs for 2024 just to preserve, and then we also had to pay for the consultant and then pay for the study, which costs money as well. But I think at the time, right, Bob, we just didn't want to make such a permanent change without having more information. But now that we do, and now that we know how much it's going to cost, I mean, like, try to take the temperature of the board. Like, do you want to spend money for, option A, option B, or now demolish entirely?
I'll speak up for, I think that we should maintain the option of reconstructing it. That to do, I guess that would be option A, to dismantle it carefully and store. Because there's been a lot of investment, there's a lot of community interest. This was an original part of the whole Shadow Pines movement and vote. And I don't think we would want to do anything as rash, for lack of a better word, is to decide to demolish. And also, a lot of work went into by the committee into looking at what to do. And I think for a lot of Penfielders, this is an emotional issue,
Yeah, I agree with Kevin. I think to walk away from it and just abandon it altogether isn't the right path. I think preservation of what we can is important, and I think the new lodge has some opportunities that Mark just mentioned, and there's certainly plenty of land to put up some kind of a structure that might be beneficial for those.
But
I think you guys are
talking about two different things.
Two different things.
That would be more option B.
Option B would be preserve the beams as much as we can and then repurpose them.
Option A was to
take it apart, exacting, and be able to put it back to
in its current.
Well, let me just say, demolishing completely and walking away, I wouldn't be in favor of. Let me just.
Okay, so A is to demolish but save it and build a barn.
And rebuild it in its exact formation.
Right.
It's like, so a rector set, take the Lincoln logs down.
if possible.
Destroy my
get an RFP
Lego,
for that.
now I'm putting it back together.
Yes.
And I believe there was a diagram of potentially relocating it closer to the Clark
That
house.
was an idea that one board member, one of the committee members had raised and had shown a potential concept of, could it be moved to another portion or another part of the Shadow Pines property? We'd have to take a look at the 200-foot setback buffer from Dolomite applies to the entire length of all the properties that are Shadow Pines property.
And
We'd have to look at that to see where that could fit.
And there's sometimes a lot of talk about, having, a more vibrant place for people to go, that kind of thing. There was talk about that, with Shadow Pines. I definitely think that the new park is part of that. There were some ideas in the packet regarding things that structure could be used for, different activities, different things like that, even potential business opportunities in there. So, I just thought that was, an interesting possibility to try to preserve and really consider. So.
And my thought is just with the cost, and I guess more to come or more information to come, I would struggle with spending a couple $100,000 on this particular project. If we could preserve timbers in some way through the Clark house, that makes some sense. If, I don't know what the number would be, but I'm just thinking what 100, 200,000, what else we could do with that in other parts of the town. And I don't disagree. I don't know how many people are really aware of the barn, like a lot of things. So I can go.
Lots of people, Jeff.
Yeah, I get it. But are there other uses of that money that would be beneficial to all 39 residents of the town is one way to look. So the money really drives me a little bit in the cost, and maybe there's more to come on that with some of the bids. But and then there's complications with what you would do on where the barn site is. If we had to create parking, there's also the buffer, and it's complicated.
What I would want to share with the board now, just for your awareness, is that if it was renovating the barn sort of in the structure, say if the structure in its current form could be sort of rehabilitated potentially without could be rehabilitated, sort of shore it up, and then if you're working underneath it to fix things, you're working on the exterior to fix things. It's in the most of the barn is in that 200-foot buffer. So we would have to make sure Dolomite was okay with just that course of action of, we're not changing anything, but now to add parking around it and add any amenities, they might take issue or have an issue. They may not want to grant that relief from that buffer that's in the deed to the property. So we'd have to have that conversation with Dolomite, I think, before you decided to resurrect it. If we take it down, putting it back there at its current location may not be an option.
It's kind of grandfathered in as is.
Well, it is, but it wasn't anticipated to make improvements around it, so so we'd have to really have a conversation with Dolomite for anything happening on that particular site where it sits currently. If you were going to do careful demolition with the idea of trying to rebuild it in its existing sort of form somewhere else, and we could find a site that did not have any buffer issues, then that's just a town decision, and then you can look at what the costs are.
Obviously, the cost of reconstruction and rebuild.
The cost of reconstruction.
The 250 is not in that. That's just to take it apart and.
Right, so the reconstructing it is, again, even just looking at the cost estimate that was provided in the structural report, for them to shore it up where it's sitting was going to be about $1 million just to get it back to a barn structure. So potentially moving it to a new location, could it be the same price, different price, maybe a little bit less because you don't have to, you're not dealing with the basement?
Then you need to know the use of the barn. I mean, it's just, right now, it's just no barn. It's not a publicly accessible structure.
So I don't want to jump ahead of Linda, but if I can just make a suggestion. So I consider, in my brain, I think about it in multiple phases, and regardless of whether or not we put it there, put it somewhere else, like we've got to take it down, right?
Right.
And so if I'm hearing everyone, it would be to try to preserve that core timber as much as possible, whether we decide later, depending on cost, right? Depending on cost, whether we decide to rebuild it as a barn, move it across the street someplace, somewhere, or again, depending on how the dismantling goes, there's also human error involved. There's a lot of, assuming how it goes and what is preserved, if unfortunate things happen and only like 2 timbers are saved, maybe we can just repurpose that somewhere else internally, or just save it as just a historical relic, something, so, wait, right. You look
I'm just trying to soak in what you're saying, just so we kind of know is what we're looking for us to go forward.
Phase 1 would be it's got to come down, and that I would, like Kevin said, I really appreciate the committee's work. I've been with them for most of the year, and so I would like to propose a resolution for
the bid process. We don't need the resolution quite yet. We can just prepare bid documents.
Bid documents for
the RFP.
The RFP.
Oh, the RFP. Yeah.
Yeah, the RFP just to get a quotes on what, and do we want to.
It'd be a public bid because it's a capital improvement.
Yeah.
So not an RFP though.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, public bid.
Okay. What would it be for?
The public bid would be for demolition services to do selective demolition, and then
preserving
the timbers.
Dismantle and store.
And storage.
Yeah, right.
Correct.
Because there's going to be a cost with that, so it would be good to know.
Do we want to get 2 prices?
Do you want to have
with and without storage?
No, one for selective demolition to take it apart, label every piece that comes in it. This was 250, it comes in at $500,000.
Is that what's in here?
The second is to take it down and save as much of the timber as we can. That may be
in usable
50
sections.
I think
in usable sections, at least the board has, if we're going to ask for quotes, get 2 quotes. One is take every piece off, label it. Take every.
So if that comes in at, $2 million, right, what's our plan B? Well, let's know the plan B.
Let's save 20-foot chunks of the beam and take it down, and that's.
Because what I will say is, in talking with, I will tell you that if after the meeting with the barn committee wanting to be prepared for this meeting, I did reach out, I obviously reached out to the demolition contractor, but I also reached out to Peter Matthews to say.
Oh, good.
He was the barn, at the beginning of the, he's the person who does, it's Matthews Building Movers.
Oh, okay.
And he didn't have the capacity to do a structural analysis. He's not an engineer. But he explained that this is can be a really challenging undertaking, and the prospect of selectively he said
It's an old barn.
It's an old barn, he said, and it can be, you can run into problems and issues when you're doing your best to try to take something down. And he was sharing his own personal experiences with him and his brother-in-law taking a barn down. So just, it's good to have a plan B.
Well, I could
as
just
part of the
picture-
bid.
Until we do it, you don't know.
No,
Right,
Yeah.
right.
right.
So what do you need from us?
So tonight, if you want to just authorize the bid.
For the two.
All in?
Yeah,
Yes.
and
All in?
Yes.
it'll be one bid package, and in the specification, it's going to say option A, option B.
Yeah.
And it'll be a breakdown of the pricing. That will separate storage from the actual
Yes,
work.
yes.
And we'll share that with the board before it goes out, the verbiage, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
we're going to need a little time, because this is not a common, typically you can borrow, beg and steal from other communities, like your latest bid documents.
Right.
This one's going to be a little bit more unique. Yeah, I'll reach out to a couple of folks, and we may have
Committee
some.
might know too, right?
I'm sorry?
The committee might
Yes.
have ideas for you?
There were some recommendations from the Landmark Society as well.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, there are.
Okay, but I think that, we want
Okay.
it at least prepared as quickly as possible so that the
Yep.
work can start as quickly as possible.
Sure.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. Do you want to get back in the agenda, or you want to do the last information item?
While we're here,
Well, we could keep with the informational and,
might as well get,
I can do it.
yeah.
traffic's so
Staff
fresh.
go.
Let's finish.
We talk about a lot of traffic tonight, so I did share with the committee, I think, all
Go ahead, no,
900 pages of whatever was in the document. So this was something that was started a while ago, was
Right.
looking at intersections in town and looking at very specific intersections. If you look at it, 250 was not included in it, not to say there aren't issues on 250, but we looked very closely at those intersections as part of the mixed-use corridor study. So then those were already studied, we looked at other ones. So basically doing a traffic study of the town, you're unlikely to change most of the roads, the widths, the number of lanes, so we looked and focused on the intersections. So we're looking, we've shared it with the Transportation Committee, sharing it with the board tonight as an informational item, so you have it first. We'll put it out to the web, for the public, and then we can use this document. There are recommendations out of it that we can go back, and most are state and county roads, and advocate, ones at Creek and Plank is advocating for a dedicated turn arrow based on there's a dedicated turn lane. But as people come through there, if you've ever gone southbound on Creek, turning left on Plank Road, you kind of wait, and then hope you can duck out behind a car there. So part of the, would be advocate and use this document to advocate with the county and say, hey, this is time, maybe you guys need to look at doing some updates to your traffic lights to put a dedicated turn arrow in this. So
in there. And there's a development going on in that area, right? A dental at Creek and Plank?
No,
Further
that's-
south.
That's Creek and
Atlantic.
Browncroft.
Oh, that's,
Creek and Atlantic, but
Yep.
a little bit south of that. So just tonight as informational, share with the board. It's out there before we put it out to the public. But this looked at, specific intersections. They analyzed every crash, every instance. Why? Was it just accidental? Was there, things that can be done to these intersections to help with traffic flow, help with traffic safety? So unless the board has questions, about it, we're just going to put it
I
out
have
to the.
questions, but I can send them to
Okay.
you.
I mean, you just wanted to give it to the board first
Yeah, no,
before we
it's
put
good.
it out to the public, and then, again, say we'll use this to work with the county and state to look at specific intersections and, advocate for turn arrows, turn pockets, signal timing adjustments.
There was a
other
lot of
things that-
signal timing adjustments.
Yep, things that they can work together on and how to better, have
Right.
traffic flow go through town. So a little different than kind of most traffic studies, but I think
Just
this.
intersections.
Just intersections, but overall, you don't often see roads go from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, or 4 lanes is a road
Right.
down to 2 lanes, and so others have focused on that, but that doesn't really change that much. Intersections where you kind of get most of your delay at.
Right.
So if we can adjust those and work with those agencies, hopefully that helps with, traffic flow and delays.
And it
in
also
town.
answers the questions for them. It saves them the work of having to do the study themselves. If
We've-
we just come to them saying, the intersection doesn't work great, there were lots of backups, now they've got to do the
They've got
work.
the
and-
Yeah, we've done the homework, and we can hand it to them, say,
Right.
here's the study, we've hired, it had been a consultant, they looked at it, they may have some, other questions, but we've done a lot to kind of help
And
move that.
250 and 441 was in here. It's the other
Further up, the
Yes.
pieces,
We're not,
250 at Atlantic and 250 in Wayland.
Wayland.
They weren't in there because we've looked at them in the 250 corridor study.
Gotcha.
That's also out there, that document, also is publicly available. But just so people look and say, well, these are very important sections, we're looking at mixed use, we're talking about that area currently, why aren't they in this document? Because we studied them, so closely in the other piece.
Can I ask one question?
Ask as many as you...
So this is 20 to 22. When you request a study like this, and I think it was Passero put it together?
Passero.
Passero, thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, this was Barton LaJudas that did this.
Pardon me?
Barton LaJudas is our consultant for this one.
My mistake. What is the timing for it? So it only went to 2022, December 31st, 2022. It's now close to December 31st, 2024. So 2 years have passed, and we know a lot has changed in Penfield. So I'm just curious, when you request this, what is that timing? Did they start in 2022 and only look back 2 years? Did they start in 2023 and only look back 2 years? How does that timing work? Does it take them that long?
I mean, this one, they went out and did counts and everything else.
Okay.
It took them this long to do the counts, and, I mean, we got it in the spring, summer, and then we wanted to talk to transportation, so it's off in the summer, so it got a little bit delayed
Okay.
there, but...
No
they
judgment, I'm just curious.
Yep, they actually went out and did counts and sat at the intersection and counted number of cars going by, doing, turn movement counts, as well as all the research, as the other traffic consultant shared.
Right.
The state has a database you can go through and look at every accident and everything else. So some of that is how far back does the data go? The state stuff isn't as current, so sometimes you've got to look
There's a
back a little
lag
bit.
sometimes.
There's a
Right.
lag in their data, and then obviously a time
Sure.
to count and everything else. So it's hard to have a
Right.
today count, as they enter accident data and stuff like that.
Especially for all the intersections.
We've got to look back. And as it was here, I forget how much we paid, but we got 15 intersections,
Right.
and this was, not cheap to do this. So, we tried to focus, and we met with the Transportation Committee and said, here's the list of all of them. Which ones, here's what we can afford based on this dollars that we have, which ones you want to focus on. So
Right.
they kind of pared the list down. We kind of didn't look at, intersections within subdivisions and other stuff, just as, they're not as traveled. And, so we try to put a little bit of thought and methodology of where do you get the most
Right.
bang for your buck? Where do you get, most impact is at traffic lights and, major intersections. We did have them specifically look at, it may seem odd on the counts and the crash data, but the intersection of Jackson and Plank just up here, knowing the school bus garage is going in. So they said to us, there's nothing going on there. What do you want us to look at that for? And we said, we want baseline data. We know the school bus garage is going in. We know the Rocco Pines development is still coming online. Let's look at that and then have some recommendation. Right now, it's a four-way stop with a blinking light at top. Does that need to change once the bus garage comes online? And that changes, we've kind of got some baseline data and then can go back to the county going, okay, there's school buses through here now, that's changed the intersection. There's new development in this area that's changed. So that one, if you look at it, they kind of said to us, well, there's really not a lot going on here yet. And we said,
Get ready.
exactly. Exactly, it's the yet. So
Get your crystal ball out.
and we're trying to look ahead, and
Right. No,
so
that's
it's part of the
smart. That's
planning is to
good. Strategic, yeah.
look at that.
Like that. Good, thank you. And I do have questions, but also
Okay,
separately.
that's fine.
Want to give Sue a little poke? I'm losing her over there. It's 4 yawns in the last 2 minutes. Sorry, okay.
No.
Need late afternoon coffee to
So next item is proposed law, I believe, to establish a renewable energy system regulation.
Yes, so this has been on the agenda with the town board at several work session meetings. On the night of the public hearing, we had some positive comments in support of the proposed regulations to add renewable energy systems regulations to our town code. But on that, during the day or that afternoon, the town board did receive one written comment asking a series of questions and raising some potential issues or potential suggested changes.
I'm sorry, Carrie, to interrupt. I'm so sorry. Before we lose Sue here. So we all briefed it. We do remember there were technical questions. I do see the red line responses that went to that person. I also myself reached out but did not get a response. Did the town get any further response?
So actually, the red line you saw is actually the feedback from the EECC.
Right.
Yeah,
It didn't
yes,
go to the
yeah.
resident, yeah.
That didn't get shared back to the resident, so
EECC's respond to the public comment received.
that's the ECC responding, but to let
So
you
it didn't
know.
go to the-
It hasn't gone to the resident yet.
Right. It hasn't, there's been no response. So I think we could certainly reach out to the resident to let them know that the EECC had,
Okay.
And the
Yeah.
ECC
I mean-
recommended that things stand the way they were.
Right, there was no change. The
Yeah.
EEC said no
And-
change. But I think whatever we decide tonight, regardless, we'll make sure we send that out to
We can also just acknowledge, I think from the town's perspective, the concern was some of the changes that were being asked for would render the regulations insufficient, severely limited, and we'd be overstepped by New York State anyway.
Okay.
So New York State could come in and say, you're being too
So Pete's
restrictive.
taken a look, EECC has no further revisions.
Correct.
Right?
So the local law, as it's in your hands, is what EECC is suggesting.
And what we had in our hands.
For the last month.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a resolution that we, for the local law to be adopted as written.
Okay, perfect. And I'm going to prepare that.
Need a second.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Forgive me. And you need a roll call vote before I'm chiming in with my, I apologize.
Got you something to do, Sue.
Barry.
So yeah. Okay.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Leenhouts.
Aye.
And Teglash.
Aye.
All aye.
Did you have something to say?
I was going to say that in the interest of time, would the town board be amenable to having a special legislative session added to the organizational meeting on the 8th? Because that's this.
We
You're gonna be
already
there
have
anywhere.
a legislative session. We have a special town board scheduled, and the 8th as well, there's a legislative section. So
Wonderful.
it will
I'll
be
add it
adopted
for
on the
that.
8th. Thank
Okay.
you.
Beautiful. And just to remind everyone at home that the adoption of that local law also ends the moratorium on solar applications that was in effect.
Yeah, and we know, too, that Color Penfield Green was very involved and supported it.
Okay, last on your list, Carrie, is the EPOD, amend the EPOD.
Yes, so as you know, we've been, the town staff prepared some draft amendments to an existing chapter 250-6.1, which is the Environmental Protection Overlay District regulations. Some comments were made and questions were raised. EECC has taken another look at the draft, and we've identified some modifications that will be reflected in the draft local law that we've shared with you, and the request would be to set the public hearing needed to contemplate those regulations. And so I'd like to ask that we can set that public hearing. We can just need a vote here. We don't need a resolution to vote.
February 5th.
Yes.
February 5th.
Yes.
Yes.
All in.
All in.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so I'll set the public hearing for that as well.
Great.
February 5th is going to be a busy night.
Yeah, February, buckle up, because that's going to be, we've got several public hearings happening that night now.
All right, anything else?
Since this is a public session, I would like to ask Mark one question, because I've been getting so many calls on it.
Sorry, go ahead. Are you bringing that up right now?
No.
Okay.
And that's about the arbors. I've been getting a lot of questions as to why is there no development, nothing's happening, rumors spreading. So I'm just curious, I wanted to ask you, can you share some, or shed some light on why there is no development?
So actually, the delay is due to RG&E. Unfortunately, we've been talking to them for many, many years and sharing that development along that whole corridor is coming. They said they had no issues, no capacity concerns. They've were shared the plans several years ago. Once the planning board approved them, that's typically when RG&E gets involved. No issues, concerns came up, and then now that they've had buildings up out of the ground, all of a sudden they've had come up and said, sorry, we got issues and we can't supply power to you. So I believe those are resolved. I believe, and I don't know as of today if the power is on, so they can only finish the building so far in order to have heat in them until you finish and do the final finishes in it. So they're fully committed to completing the project. Once the power's on, they'll have heat, and they may at this very moment. Once they have that, they'll finish the interiors of the buildings, and they were looking to start renting, right after the first of the year, so whatever that time frame is. So they're still fully committed to the project, looking to move forward. It's a delay issue due to utilities.
All right, thank you.
That's a great question. It's a big issue, and I know that Sarah joined a meeting with the county, with RG&E, in their capacity summit, and I haven't heard any feedback yet, but...
And we've had RG&E in, and we try to keep, conversation going with them to hopefully prevent some of these things, and we'll continue to, hopefully improve communication with them.
Great. Okay, thank you. Anything else? No old business, no new business, so we'll adjourn. Our next work session is Wednesday, January 15th. Thank you.